7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
Eoin, Sheahan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ger. Big day for you.
Well, big day for me, but we're back. Sport is back all around the world. It is a big day for me and for everybody involved from the county of Kildare, the best county in Ireland.
Well, I was also the fact that it's a first new working day in your new year as a 40-something-year-old. I don't even know what age you were. We wished you a happy birthday last week. Another belated happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
Your late birthday present is getting to represent and wave that famous white flag. The people of Kildare, Ger Gilroy is your man today.
Waving the white flag is a flag of surrender, Eoin. Obviously, for us, it's a brilliant white, a celebration like Real Madrid. Top to toe, the whiteout like Penn State do, where everybody comes and wears white and the whole stadium shakes because everybody's, singing with one voice. Look, I listened to Down. I didn't hear it live. I listened back to the full podcast on Friday afternoon, and it was sensational. Colin Murray was absolutely amazing. Was Colin Murray supposed to come on and stay on for like 2 minutes? Was that the plan?
That was the plan. He was the final pitch thing that some people might be familiar with. Either, you record a video for like 20 seconds or come on and take a call for 2 questions. And it went on. Like, we could have done another half an hour with him. He
did about 20 minutes and he'd obviously really thought about it and agonised over who exactly should be on the list. And was like exactly, I thought, a counterpoint in the week of Buff Egan as it was, a brilliant counterpoint for us to wrap up last week was having Colin Murray on the show just talking about what sport meant to him, and he was really funny and he was brilliant. And then the two lads obviously agonising slightly over and a bit of game theory going on, which got me thinking about who do I put on the list. So Joe Malloy is going to take somebody off my list and put somebody else on, or else unlikely agree with my list, which I suspect he won't. So that's coming up a little bit later on. If anybody wants to do any last minute lobbying, then my bank account is open. I am absolutely happy to take bribes in food, alcohol, travel. If we could ever do that again, I'd be up for that. But, so let no one doubt that this process is corruptible. I just want to put that out there right now.
You're going to send forth your Revolut username on Twitter right now. So that's where you send your cash.
Is that safe? Is it not safe? Like, would it...
I don't know. Is bribery in general safe? Sure. I think you just got to embrace the danger here.
This is a sports show. Oh, and of course, history is littered with the best bribes winning European Cups and the right to host World Cups. And it turns out sport's pretty corruptible. The other thing that's happening this morning is we're talking to the young Kerry man who next year, when the Masters happens, there's going to be loads of Kerry jerseys at the Masters in Georgia because their new punter is going to be from Kerry. And I can see this now. We're not going to be able to tell anymore that it's a clever young man from Kerry who made it to the Masters. It's actually going to be Georgia Tech fans in the crowd at Augusta.
Yeah, David Shanahan, the new kid, he's going to be with us later on. The new Georgia Tech punter. He's obviously had his sights set on this for quite some time. I'm looking forward to hearing the story. He was part of the 2017 under-17 team with Kerry. He would have been part of the same team as Davidas Juosis, the Lithuanian goalkeeper who's gone off to play Australian rules at this point. And it's an incredible story. There's not too many people that you hear of who actually managed to make this breakthrough. But it's even rarer, Ger, I think, that somebody's actually had their sights set on this from such a young age and managed to see this thing through. Like, he's been talking the last 24 hours about watching NFL as a 10 or 11-year-old in the middle of the night while living in Ireland and stuff, which is kind of remarkable that he's had this singular focus of making it in American football. And it's actually worked out for him so far, a scholarship to one of the biggest college football programs in the United States. I'm also very, very thankful for your message of hope there, that we will actually have people at the Masters next year.
Well,
that we're going to have crowds at sports events next April. So you know what, I can live if as long as we have that.
As I said, sport was back last night. In the middle of it, Donald Trump rang in, and Mike Tirico, his golf buddy, interviewed him, gave him such a hard roasting in that interview. Even brought up Rory McIlroy's comments last week and then bottled the opportunity to put them to the president. But he said, we're going to have sports back, and not just like 15, 20,000, we're going to have 80,000 back in stands. And you know what? If the President of the United States says that, we can take it as read, Eoin.
I'm a big fan of this new era that we're in, which is live sports events are now call-in shows. That I guess it had to happen because you've only got 4 golfers on the course yesterday, with those large swathes of nothingness filled by, I don't know, Donald Trump phoning in. Obviously, I think some people on Twitter last night were like, and it was at that moment that I turned off. It was not at that moment that you turned off. It was at that moment that you turned your television up to see the car crash that might ensue. Nobody is advocating the decision to take Donald Trump onto the show, but it certainly raised a lot of eyebrows, and it's certainly the thing, outside of Rory McIlroy's trash talk, that people are going to remember the most from that Skins game last night. Yeah,
I mean, I was following it on Twitter after a while, and I went to bed. I was like, I don't know who won on the final hole. Did anybody win in the final hole? It was like £1 million.
Rory and DJ did.
Right, very good. A crappy quiz question for the future. Who won? Rory and DJ, or the other two? It was not the other two, Wolf and Fowler. We'll talk about that a little bit later on with Nathan, maybe because sport did come back. We're also going to talk about the top 10 sports events at the Aviva in rugby and football over the next couple of weeks, so you can get your votes in for that. One of the polls is now live on our Twitter account. If you go over to twitter.com/offtheball, just search @offtheball, you'll find it. But Packy Bonner is the latest in the series of feature-length interviews that's happening every Sunday afternoon for you on Off the Ball on Newstalk. So here he is talking with Joe about his career, his time with Jack Charlton, his time with Ireland, and being a brilliant penalty saver in the end.
Sometimes I cringe at some of the things that I was doing as a player. One of the faults I had actually, and maybe it was down to maybe playing Gaelic football a little bit. I used to jump early. When I went into maybe 2 or 3 people and I went in midfield, I would kind of very much go under the ball and jump early and try and catch it before anybody else was near me. And in soccer terms,
there seems
that
to be some
was a
problems
problem
with the
because
audio on that one. This is generally the bit of the show where Eoin nips off and, puts on a cup of tea for himself and whoever else. And I'm not even sure if Eoin's there, but if he is, then Eoin, good morning to you. Yes,
I would not be laughing unless that was actually pretty much bang on.
You were like
go. This is 7:35 a.m. is when I upgrade from jocks to tracksuit bottoms, and the opportunity hasn't presented itself today because Packy Bonner couldn't actually give us any audio.
It was good stuff he was saying as well. It was really good stuff, I promise you. The upgrade from jocks to tracksuit bottoms is an image that, the rest of the country's like, yeah, that's right. I mean, everybody's kind of bored of Zoom calls, it turns out. There was like a definite tipping point in the last 6 days, 5-6 days, where people were like, no, had enough. I'm not doing any more of that,
a lot of people
socialising on Zoom.
Did you
have a good weekend of socialising on Zoom, or is this now the point where everybody's like, socially distancing and bumping into people that you accidentally seem to be on the same time schedule as?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The group of people that we've been doing Zoom quizzes with, it's a number of around 8, 9, or 10. So what are we? We are around 8, 9, or 10 weeks in, and everybody's taken a different week to actually write the quiz. I was the first person to do it, and I think it's coming back around to me very soon. So we're all either out of ideas or need to come up with something new. And I think the whole idea of it has actually, it's going to get stale at some point. It's the only manner of actually socialising, but it is better than nothing. I think that's the fact that you could actually go to bed on Friday night and actually say to yourself, there is live football on tomorrow, definitely leaves yourself with a different look at the weekend for sure. And I think the fact that something is back means that we're going to start approaching this on a downhill level, right? That there's going to be more and more things that actually come on stream, more strange things like skins games that perhaps you might indulge in over the next little while. I don't know. Yeah, so it felt a little bit right again the last couple of days. Not anywhere near correct, but it felt a little bit right, didn't it?
Yeah, and certainly he was much busier out there on around where I live was certainly way busier than it has been for the last while. Busier this morning coming in than it has been. Much busier last Friday going home from work than it had been traditionally over the lockdown period. So I think people are, I think people are just moving around a bit more than they had been, and I would hope that there's still a little bit of caution out there when it comes to coughing on your neighbour, etc. And we'll wait and see for that one. I did want to ask you a little bit about what you thought of the football. Somebody made the point, and we've been talking about this a good bit about how do you upgrade the viewer experience from what we would see normally versus what's going to happen now with no fans, because obviously something has to change, otherwise it's just the same product, only lesser.
You obviously know David very well, Joe.
Changed with German football.
There's a Raymond
no
Carver.
Crowd noise pumped in, no fake people in the crowd, no enhanced virtual reality, no extra access to the players. How did the whole experience leave you?
A little bit emptier than usual. And I guess that's what you were expecting. But there was definitely a similar level of fulfillment in certain areas, which I actually had forgotten about, or I didn't actually expect to come my way. So, like when you're seeing Dortmund, so the
this
game
is a
I
good
watched
thing, but
was
it's far from
Dortmund
small.
against Schalke.
Like it's a really big deal what he's done.
Union Berlin
and the
against Bayern Munich
movement in a
yesterday,
way
but
that he's
Dortmund
kind
against
of
Schalke was the main one. And even though the result becomes pretty clear that Dortmund are going to run away with this game, you still have that little part of your brain that when Dortmund are attacking for the millionth time of the second half, you're like, okay, how are they going to work an opportunity here? Who is the individual talent on the ball here? And how will the ball get squared for Erling Haaland eventually? And that sort of individual admiration of professional footballers is something that is unaffected by crowd noise. And in those little moments of brilliance, you're like, this is right, this is perfect. And when Erling Haaland side foots that ball into the far bottom corner, you're like, right, okay, I got a little bit of a buzz off this. This is the way a regular Bundesliga game should be to us, a viewer here in Ireland. And then he goes and celebrates and does his dance, and his teammates all stay 2 meters away. And you're like, right, this is weird. But this is also the exact metaphor for what sport in the new normal will be, where sport can happen, but people just can't enjoy it as much. And Erling Haaland, a goal occurred by the name of Erling Haaland on Saturday, but Erling Haaland did not get the great fulfillment out of it because of no fans in celebration.
What would change your sense of it being something that was slightly unfulfilling? Could enhanced reality, could crowd noise, could you sitting in that stadium have helped?
I think so. I definitely think so. And enhance it a little bit. It's never going to replicate the real thing. But I think from a television standpoint, like to go back to I can't remember the game in Korea that I was watching last week, but the
Blue Wings.
Blue Wings, of course, and their crowd noises actually did enhance it a little bit. I'm not going to lie. So from a television standpoint, yes, there are. I know you've been kind of like reading up on other innovative ways that Korea have been trying to up the ante this week.
They accidentally shipped in a lot of sex dolls as opposed to mannequins, so there's a mild controversy around that.
But maybe sex dolls are just cheaper than mannequins, and you've got to applaud anybody for being frugal during these tough times.
And who cares, really? I mean, ultimately, who cares?
It is true. It really does not make a difference whatsoever come the end.
The same people who are ringing Liveline to complain about normal people are the people who are like going through the crowd with a magnifying glass, go, oh, hang on a second, what's this I see? That doesn't look anatomically correct.
It's an interesting thing to have done. Like I'm sure it was a deliberate ploy, and maybe it was sort of, let's see how eagle-eyed our fans really are sitting at home watching our league to see if they can actually spot the sex doll in the crowd, or the multiple sex dolls that are in the crowd. But no, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's better than I expected having football back.
Should we talk a little bit about Kildare's Mount Rushmore? I guess this is kind of the entire show today is essentially building up to Kildare's Mount Rushmore, where we talk in some great detail about our county's sports culture. When are you doing Kerry? How soon is that?
I don't know. I think it's another week.
June.
I don't know.
Is it next week?
I'd heard that it's been pushed forward, or I stumbled upon the fact that it's been pushed forward, so it could be this day next week. But how are you feeling? Is it you were tweeting that it's like Leaving Cert morning?
Well, it was cool, and it does feel like today's going to be a nice warm day. But you know the way when you get up proper early for your exam day and you're like, yeah, come on, let's go. Exam's going to happen today, and then it's going to be a lovely day after that, or actually maybe the afternoon is going to be a bit hot and you're going to be sitting inside it. So there's that kind of tension about what the day is going to be like. It felt like that today. There was like, walking in going, this kind of reminds me of like the summer of 1995, walking in to do my leaving cert. And so the long list, one of the most impressive, best things that anybody did when they came in here was Paul Rouse just saying, "Oh no, I have to have seen the person. I'm not going back beyond that. I have to have seen the person." And I was like, "That's a good idea," because that gets me out of having to put Larry Stanley on my team. Now maybe Joe's going to make the case that Larry Stanley absolutely needs to be in the team, so he captains Kildare to an All Ireland, and also represents Ireland in the 1924 Summer Olympics, where he finishes 10th in the high jump. When you think about that, like, imagine now somebody being the best Gaelic footballer in the country and captaining a county. He then goes on and plays for Dublin, by the way. A bit of a minus point here along the lines. Like, well, I know travel was difficult back then, but like, we're nitpicking here. So, and then he goes and competes in the Olympic Games and finishes in the top 10. That's pretty impressive. That guy's athletic, and somebody that you should really have a statue for, and there should be stories about, and everybody should know about. But are you putting him up on the side of a mountain?
For me, you're not. I think you obviously have a statue and you have a commemoration of your great sporting achievers in a county. But I think Mount Rushmore has become so much more than just your high achievers. It would be very easy to scroll to the right, go towards number of medals won, sort by, and then pick your top 4, and then that would be your Mount Rushmore. If you did that for every county, and there would be probably a mathematical format we could do that for every county, this would be so much more boring, but it also just wouldn't make sense. It's about what the people mean to your county. Does Larry Stanley mean as much to Kildare people as Dermot Earley does? No, I would. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there, but I'm pretty certain that the answer to that question is no. However, does the fact that Larry Stanley, perhaps having had a more decorated career, does that move him ahead of a Gaelic footballer of that era? Perhaps it does. So that's up to you. That's up to Joe. That's up to Willie McCreary later on to make that call. The question I wanted to ask you was that when we're talking about Gaelic football, you're always making the point that Kildare perhaps lack a recent footballing identity. What is the sporting identity of Kildare? And is there a tenuous thing that you can speak about that would give you a great shot of being up on that mountain?
When you say a tenuous thing, I want to tease out the question. The sporting identity of Kildare is that they love racing. Like, it's a racing county. Okay. And so, when you're thinking about how many sports should be up there, there are some good rugby players. There is like an unbelievable level of achievement in boxing. There is a not great in male terms soccer, in female terms fairly sensational soccer, but like not great soccer tradition. I don't have a long list of 5 or 10 Ireland internationals. I don't have Premier League winners who are there who I can go, oh yeah, great. But on the male side, on the female side, I have somebody who is festooned, who can't walk through the building with her medals on her because they would wear down too much. And I don't know. I guess this is a question about culture, right? Like, yeah. If I was to do a Gaelic football modern era, you'd have Dermot Earley, you'd have Johnny Doyle, you'd have Niall Buckley, and you'd have Glenn Ryan, and that would cover everything that Kildare football has achieved in the last 50 years. And really, when you think about it, it's a bit of an indictment on the county, not on those guys, but on the county, that given the population and the sense of self that it is a football county, that we don't have more who you'd be like, oh, well, what about this guy? This guy was absolutely sensational. And what about this team? That team that won that All-Ireland, or that went back to back. Like, we've underachieved as a football county. I don't think that's in any way debatable. Like, is Miko in with a shout? I would say almost, but like, that team in 97 and 98 was really good. Maybe they should have won All-Ireland, They probably should have won an All-Ireland between 97 and 98. they were right there, and I don't know.
Could I just ask, what is the? Are you looking at envy at Meath's achievements around that era? Like, just because the culture seems to me to be so similar. It's racing and it's Gaelic football.
Am I looking with envy at what? Sorry.
At what Meath have achieved, and at Tommy and Hector last week talking about like sorting by All Ireland medals and teams of the Millennium and things like that.
Meath's Gaelic football. Meath are a far superior Gaelic football tradition to Kildare, and Kildare should be rightly angry, annoyed, pissed off about the quality of Meath's record for like similarly positioned geographical. I think Kildare has a bigger population than Meath, and yet you could definitely, like, they have vastly outperformed Kildare in terms of number of All Irelands won, number of All Stars. I was looking back. It was so Wikipedia has a list of every single All Star team from the time the All Stars were invented. They didn't go back and do the Cahullin Awards, I don't think, which I hadn't heard about until Conor Deegan brought them up the other day. But Kildare were 14th on the list of Gaelic football All Stars in 2014, and I don't think they've won one since. Like, that's just in the top half of the country for the number of All-Stars we've ever had. That's not great, is it?
No, it's I would definitely have had the phrase sleeping giant in my head at the moment, but if you're looking in historical terms, it's probably a giant who has had a legacy of underachievement, really. There's, like, I don't know, like, you definitely associate it with racing and GEA more than anything else, and then you probably think about the underachievement in GEA. The lack of a recent All Ireland medal is something that definitely harms the legacy, especially when you're putting them up. Some of the jockeys and trainers that the county has produced, like the very, very top of their field.
Yeah. There was a boxer called Non-Parai Dempsey. I was like, is this the Jack Dempsey? I was like, hang on, Jack Dempsey was the Manasseh Mauler. As far as I know, Manasseh not in Kildare. And there was another boxer called Jack Dempsey who was Irish and from Kildare. And obviously not the Jack Dempsey who would have been straight on Mount Rushmore if he was actually from Kildare. If we could somehow manage to claim Jack Dempsey, no problem, straight in. But Non-Parai Dempsey, like, what an 18th century, 19th century name. And like, you can steal that and talk about Kildare's achievements in racing and put them up against anywhere. Like, so for Johnny Murtagh, see Ruby Walsh. For whatever trainers Meath have, there's a list. So you could actually have, a Kildare Racing Mount Rushmore, which would have Dermot Weld, John Ox, Jessica Harrington and Ruby Walsh, and you'd be leaving off Pat Edery. And if there's a bit of debate, because I know there is a bit of debate about whether or not Jessica gets in under the border, then you'd stick Pat Edery on that, and you'd still be like, very few counties could get anywhere close to it.
It's also like, it's rare. Only a few counties have had absolute bankers as well, due to their unbelievable achievement. Like, we had George Best and Rory McIlroy last Friday, which was rare that we'd have two complete bankers. And Kildare is a county that still has a banker in Ruby Walsh. Like, this is, as much as we want to slag the county off for a lack of Gaelic football bankers as such, there is at least one racing sports person here where it makes the Ireland's racing Mount Rushmore, you would have thought.
Yeah, I would absolutely say. But then that's why we've got Willie McCreary on today, is just to give us a little bit of context, because obviously, like, my understanding of where Ruby is versus where a trainer goes, like, sure. How do you weigh these up? And particularly, like, we also think of racing as one sport, but it's not. It's two very distinct sports. The ability to get a horse to jump and the ability to get a horse to run fast over the flat, they are essentially, like, similar, run on the same tracks in some cases, but actually very different sport. And so you've got this whole kind of strain of people who are geniuses at getting the horses to run super fast, and also other ones who are brilliant at presenting them. And then there's this other group of people who every year are winning awards and setting records. And how do you compare and contrast what this jockey can do with different two-year-olds every single year versus what this jockey can do 4 or 5 years in a row at Cheltenham? Very difficult for us to be able to weigh those up.
And that's what McCreary's going to do later on, to actually educate us on what the difference is. I would have thought, though, and I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong here, Ruby Walsh is your number one head on the Mount Rushmore overall in any sport. And then he will be educating us on whether or not there is one or two other racing names with him and who those two names or one name is going to be. And
is there a case for him putting himself on?
I would have thought so. Like, I mean, how humble is he? Like, it's certainly question number one, isn't it? How close did you get? I mean, like, you're the person who's going to be making this list. I'm sure he's coming to your thinking.
I mean, definitely. Like, so somebody who is your best midfielder for a while and plays in an All-Ireland final, wins another Leinster, and then goes off and has a second career as a brilliant trainer.
Unbelievable. And the cross-pollination of different sports, I don't think has been something that's been overly rewarded so far in the Mount Rushmore series. But for what he's done over two vastly different games, I think he deserves a bit of recognition.
Timmy Barry Murphy got punished for it in Cork, by the way. So, right, it is 7:55 this morning. Let's get back to Joe Malloy's Legends interview yesterday afternoon with Packy Bonner. More talk about Mount Rushmore coming your way in just a few minutes.
At any stage now, in the previous 30 years or in the next 30 years, what is Ireland's greatest sporting moment? It is you saving that penalty. What a mad thing.
It is.
In the cup final in Scotland before that shootout, I think it finished 9-8. You didn't go the right way once.
Absolutely. I think I was delighted in one way that I shouldn't say that, but Anton Rogan missed the penalty because I was next up to hit a penalty. and not that I was delighted to lose the cup final, but no, I didn't go the right. I went the right way for one penalty, Jim Bett's penalty.
Okay.
And I knew where Jim Bett was putting it because he was a normal penalty taker, and I went the right way. The rest of them, I just couldn't read them at all. You know, Brian Irvin scoring against me, my God, centre half. Alec McLeish scoring against me, putting me the wrong way. I went the wrong way, absolutely, for them all. So I had to learn from that, though. We sat down. I sat down with Jerry Payton, who was my great comrade and great friend and fellow goalkeeper, and we kind of sat down. Jerry had watched it, and we'd worked out that maybe we needed a new tactic, a new way, a new plan, and that's what we put together for the big moment. Not thinking maybe that it was going to come around in the World Cup, but certainly it did, and I was ready for it.
And you had been going the right way in the build-up to the Timofte penalty, so it clearly worked.
Yeah.
It was effectively the angle of their run-up, that was what you relied on?
Yeah, there was a couple of things. Yeah, you kind of read the situation a bit better. I was on a high going into the penalty shootout because I played quite well in the game, even though it was 0-0. We had a few saves from Timofte. I just felt really good and sharp. One of them days, some days you wake up and your legs a bit heavy and so on and so forth, and you're not quite at it. And other days you could take on the world, and that was one of those days. I felt really strong, mentally and physically, and then I had prepared properly. And when I went into it, it was just the way that they walked up, the position that he took. I had this idea that, and we'd worked out that if they kind of stood kind of straight on, they were going to either blast or side-footed. And if they were going to stand at an acute angle, they would put it back into the side that they were standing on. And that's exactly what happened, more or less. I was a bit frustrated in some of the earlier penalties that I touched them and I never made the save, and I thought it was going to run away from us, and then. But when Daniel Timofte walked up, you could see the nerves in him, as you could see him just walking up to it very slowly. He came on sub during the game, so maybe he hadn't been up to speed. And the angle that he stood at, I was almost telepathic that I was going to go there. He just kind of and it wasn't a great penalty, I've got to say. It wasn't a great pace, and it was about a yard off the ground, and it was a perfect penalty to save. And when you go the right way, and it's not in the corner, it's not really a hard shot, then you have a chance to save it, and that's what happened. But it was a moment that had changed my life. It was a moment that probably people remember to this day, the emotion around it. But what a lovely journey it was during that period, because it's 30 years now and people still remember it. And some people came to me years later and said, thanks very much for allowing me to make a connect with my own family, and people had their barbecues, they had their parties, they had kids who maybe were 6-7 years old out with their family. It's a bit probably, could I say it, and I hate to say it, maybe even what we're going through now, where people are in the house with their family. and having to do all the different things that they did, maybe when they were kids, board games, and just making a connect that they have to make with families. That period was exactly the same, and they all loved it, and they look back to this day and they can remember who they were with. And the moment that the penalty shootout, and when I say the penalty, they can describe it as if it was yesterday. And likewise, I feel the same.
And ultimately, the emotion, the connection with people that they felt for others, that's why people remember it so fondly. That's ultimately, when you boil it down, that's what it's about. Am I right in saying when Jack came on board, he pretty much told you he wanted you to marshal that defence? So you talked about it in your book, that you are an introvert. You know, if we were to classify ourselves that bluntly, you're more in the introvert on a scale of the spectrum, but on the pitch that was never the case, and we could see you're very vociferous. But Jack said, I want you marshalling this defence, I want you running things. You had to step up a little bit tactically?
Yeah, you know, that's the one thing I look back on Jack, and nobody ever said to me before that I had to organise things defensively. And Jack says, you're in charge. He says, he says, you're in charge of everything. And he says, now, if you get it wrong, you're answerable to me. So not alone did he give you the responsibility, he put you under pressure. And I've always said that you can hide behind challenges and say no, or you can step up and take them on, and then you're in a better position afterwards. And that's kind of what I felt. It was almost the making of me. It made me a kind of a leader within the team also, because I had to go and tell the people like Liam Brady and Paul McGrath and those Frank Stapleton, those big guys, what they had, the positions that they had to take up for corners and free kicks and so on. I did discuss it with Mick McCarthy and Kevin Moore and the other two centre halves, and we worked it out with Jerry Payton before we went out. But it kind of almost had to take on that responsibility. And if it didn't work, then Jack always, said that he would be the one that would make the final decision. But at the end of the day, he didn't have to do that, because I think it worked. We were lucky also that we had such a big team. You know, when you think about it defensively, you had Mick and Kevin too. Kevin wasn't the tallest, but he was strong physically in the air. Mick was 6'1", I was 6'2". You had Paul McGrath, 6'2". Powerful in the air. Then you had the big guys up front with Niall Quinn, if he played, 6'5", stick him in the near post, and he covers that whole area. Tony Cascarino, if he played. Steve Staunton was a big lad also when he came into the team. Mark Lawrence. So we had a big strong team. And if you walked out onto the pitch and if you were in the tunnel and you were looking at the opposition and you were towering over them, you felt really confident. So you could then organise your team. And we picked up very much zonally. We didn't go man for man. The only person that really, when we came to Celtic days, Mick McCarthy always wanted to be zonal marking because he didn't like picking up close to people, and that was a throwback to the Irish team, because he went and attacked an area. So any ball that was played into certain areas, we knew that we had a physical commanding person within that area. So it was easy for me. Free kicks was something that I had to do anyway, even from my early days at Celtic. You had to go and organise walls and so on. So, but what we're saying here is I grew within the team. I grew within. I became a personality within the team. I became a leader within the team. I was a talker anyway on the pitch. Even back to my KG Rovers days, I was a bit of a talker, an organiser, and that. But I think responsibility for any young man, given it. From a person like Jack Charlton, who had won a World Cup, he always trusts you, and that came across.
I was reading a couple of interviews you did around the time your autobiography came out. I was quite surprised to read that in the build-up to the '94 World Cup, you weren't feeling good in yourself about your game. I saw the line, one of the headlines was, I maybe needed a psychologist at that time. Jerry Payton, as a great confidant, wasn't there. Alan Kelly, younger keeper coming through. You're not going to maybe talk to him about your game in the same way you might with Jerry. That struck me. I mean, not as surprising, I suppose, because we're all human. But you were so experienced. You had a World Cup and a Euros under your belt. It's interesting that in '94 almost you were not feeling good in yourself as opposed to those earlier experiences. Can you put your finger on it now, Packy?
Yeah, there was a number of things. One, I think I miss Jerry for sure. When that change comes, you become the main guy. Jerry was older than me, and he was very much like a coach, more so than a backup goalkeeper as such. And I went on to become a very good goalkeeper coach. Went to Japan, went to Arsenal. I was there for years and years. And even to sit down and talk to him about certain things like tactical situations and so on. Alan was younger, and we didn't have that same relationship. I probably should have been doing what Jerry was doing for me with Alan. And that did happen as I became the goalkeeper coach. But the other thing, probably, you mentioned it already, I was an introvert, and I kind of, when your confidence is down a little bit, you become, the introverted type of person you are.
More withdrawn almost.
Yeah, it just affects your confidence a little bit. You're not unsure of yourself slightly. So that was one thing. And then the third thing would have been when we trained, we were in Orlando as a build-up. And Orlando was just an incredible place. It was so warm. You went out, if we trained at sort of 11 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, by the time you walked from the pavilion to the training ground, you were absolutely soaking in sweat. All of those type of things. Within 20 minutes, you were absolutely gone. You couldn't do much more. And because we didn't have a goalkeeper coach, also, we had to train ourselves, and that was difficult. I had to get in goals and do my bit, and then have to take the turn at serving with Alan, and that was really difficult. So I always had this thing in my head about preparation, and I was kind of a very organised type person, and I had to work. My mind was that I had to go through my own process. I had to go through a way of working. Probably an hour's work and would be probably what I needed. Then I was lucky if I was doing 20 minutes. Even though I was completely top-level fitness, it just affected that confidence and that thinking upstairs. And I'm sure a lot of professionals, people within any sport can reflect on that also and think about it, that you need a routine, and that routine's broken, and broken in a way that you feel that you're just not quite at it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing of all that affected me going into that 94 World Cup.
How quickly do you park, for instance, the Wim Jonk mistake? Clearly, not something you do routinely, clearly, across this magnificent career you had. And I think Holland would have won that game regardless, is the truth. But how quickly can you park something like that as a goalkeeper? And the other 10 players make numerous mistakes across a game, which we've all forgotten.
Yeah, well, that's the hardest bit for all goalkeepers, is to try to get rid of that mistake as the game, especially if you're in the middle of a game, and that's not easy. That's something you can almost learn how to do over the years, and some young goalkeepers tend that they can't do that, and they have to find a way of doing it. But for me, I was lucky. Listen, the mistake happened. Even to this day, people never reflect on that. They never talk too much about it. They almost look back to the 90 World Cup and the penalty save and all that, which is nice. I'm not complaining in any way, but it was a big moment, and that really got me down. And it was the last game in the tournament, which probably helped in one way. We were out, we were gone. The holidays were coming in. You had a bit of time to recover. And my international career was winding down, so it wasn't at the start of my international career. And all of that helped. I was getting into more coaching at that point in time. Anyway, I was going back with Tommy Burns. After that, to Celtic, he had returned and asked me to come back with him to continue to play, but more so into the coaching side. So I was kind of coming to the end of my career when that happened. So that helped, to be perfectly honest. But it took me a while, I must admit, to get over it.
Yeah, it is the curse of the goalkeeper, those mistakes, as opposed to any other position.
The other point on that is that as a goalkeeper, and all young goalkeepers listening maybe today will reflect on this, that you have to have a middle ground. You can't get too high when things are going well for you, and you can't go too low when you're down there and you're making mistakes. You've got to have that sort of middle ground, and you've got to find a way to sort of get rid of those mistakes. Think about them, learn from them, but actually park them somewhere and then fill the gap with something more positive.
The good news in this interview is it's been thoroughly enjoyable. The bad news is I still wanted to talk to you about everything from the back pass rule going in '92 to your memories of even the 02 World Cup, to your work with UEFA now, like the goalkeeping position we could do an hour on and how that's changed, there were about 5 or 6 other things, but we're not going to have time to do it, which is always a good sign in a way. One thing to finish on, because I did see that the FAI has undergone massive changes, and you would have been involved for a long time, and then things ended, and you didn't talk about it for a long time, and there was definitely the sense there was hurt there. Did I see recently you were the guest of the FAI at a game? Has whatever wrongs happened there, have they been made right, or are things better there now, Packy?
No, listen, I had a wonderful time when I was in the FAI initially. When I went in as technical director, listen, I've continued in football all my life, and to take on a role within the FAI, a substantial role, I must say. And there were fantastic people there. I had great staff, great friends. I made people. I travelled around the whole of Ireland. I went to places that I didn't know existed, or didn't probably get the opportunity when I played, or used to go to Donegal all the time on my holidays. So I went all over Ireland and met brilliant people who were really into developing the game. Our big focus at the start was participation, which we did. We had to change the whole coach education pathway, which we did. And just good people around. There was always a an issue where you had to discuss with people and try to get them to change. Change is not easy in any shape or form, especially if you've been doing things for 30, 40 years and you've got to now change around a little bit. But it was a concerted effort. It wasn't just myself. We grew our staff from 25 people when I took it over from Brian, and Brian had brought in some great people and had done a really good job. I was very lucky at that point in time that we had gone through a process of developing a technical development plan, which I had to finish off with the great Pat Duffy, who's no longer with us, and Richard Fahey and the rest of the staff. And so I had to refocus for about 4 or 5 years. Things changed when the stadium came on board, and when the whole downturn came. And people talk to me about John Delaney and so on and so forth. John supported very much at the start of what we were doing, but his focus also changed. And I don't want to go into John too much. He was a difficult guy to get on side and get to work with. But we all know the history of it now without even going into that detail. What's happening now is change, and I just feel that change had to happen, and it had to happen for the right reasons, I just feel that, are we going in the right direction now? Time will tell. I hope we are. I really, really hope we are, because I've always said it, that the FAI doesn't belong to one person. Didn't belong to me when I was there as technical director. Didn't belong to John Delaney, although he probably thought it did in many ways. It belongs to the people of Ireland, and the people and whoever's the custodians in those positions of control or power or even positions of work. They have to do it for the right reasons, and they have to do it to sustain football in Ireland. I think the great thing out of this whole situation we're going through now has been tough on a lot of families, and health is a huge issue, but sport also has its place to play in Ireland, and people now would love us to be back on all sports participating for the young people and so on. So whoever's running the FAI, Niall, the board, they've got to do the right thing and do it for the right reasons, not for themselves or for anything else. That's the key for me.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
They spoke about your arm not being down beside your side. I mean, this is not Irish dancing.
OTB Sports Radio.
Basketball would have been my main game.
The brand new sports radio station from Off the Ball.
That's my point. Don't play for us if you're a proud Englishman.
Now broadcasting 24 hours a day. Live on the Go Loud app, Alexa.
You have a whole new world of possibilities.
Google Home, tune in, and offtheball.com/radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
Just coming up to 14 minutes past 8 this morning. You're welcome along to OTB AM if you've just joined us. We've been talking about Kildare's Sporting Mount Rushmore. Going to get into more details on that a little bit later on. Eoin is with us as ever. We're here until 10 o'clock from 7:30 to 10 every day. And also with us now this morning is Sheahan, who's going to bring us the very latest sports news. Shane, good morning to you. How you doing?
Not too bad, Ger. Keeping well. And yourself?
All good, yeah. Thanks very much.
We've a few bits happening this morning. It's busy enough for a Monday morning, given we're all in quarantine and there's no sport still. Well, we have the German Bundesliga back, which was a big boost to the weekend, of course.
There's loads of sport. What are you talking about? There was golf. There was football.
There is football, and racing is back soon enough as well. So it's kind of slowly getting back to normal, which is. But my beloved Werder Bremen don't play until tonight, so I don't feel like the Bundesliga is back just yet until tonight is over with. So,
What first attracted you to the millionaires Werder Bremen?
Absolutely nothing. I saw them play at the Allianz Arena against Bayern Munich. They lost 4-2. Thomas Delaney played for. I think he still plays for them as well. So, the Danish maestro that is with the Irish name. So, I guess
Dortmund now, isn't he?
He's with who now?
He's Dortmund now, isn't he? He played at the
I
weekend.
might switch to Dortmund then.
Right.
I love the way that a team getting beaten was the moment that attracted you to a team. That's genuine fandom right there.
See, I was sitting with the Bayern fans, but the Werder fans were up in a corner by themselves, very passionate and very loud. So I figured, I would have preferred to have been up there, but, it is what it is. They've been in the Bundesliga for 37 years as well. And I think they're in relegation trouble at the moment. So it would be a big shock if they were to be relegated, but they're kind of heading that way at the moment. So I feel for them a little bit.
A bit of jeopardy is exactly what these games need. A team on the verge of being relegated is the perfect bandwagon team, I think, for the next few weeks.
It adds a bit of spice to it. I think that they've only won 4 of their 25 games, I think, this season. So they've been playing really, really crap. So Leverkusen is a tough game tonight, but 7:30, and we'll see how they get on. So hopefully they can avoid relegation.
By yesterday, only one home team had actually won their game in the Bundesliga over the weekend. Obviously, an incredibly small sample size, but it does show that home crowds seem to have some impact at least. What is going on in the world of sport here, Shane?
Yeah, we'll kick off with Premier League lads, because clubs are meeting this morning to vote on whether to allow players back to training. At least 14 clubs must be in favour of these new medical protocols for the motion to pass, and if agreed, players could return to training tomorrow. However, Manchester City's Raheem Sterling, he's all over the papers today. He doesn't think players will be ready to play Premier League matches by the 12th of June. It could be a good day for Celtic fans as well. They could be crowned Scottish Premiership champions today. The SPFL board are meeting with a final decision on whether to end the top flight season early. It would also mean Hearts would be relegated to the Scottish Championship. Clubs in Spain's top 2 divisions will begin training in groups of up to 10 players from today, with their aim to get matches starting up again from the 12th of June. However, Serie A clubs have decided to delay their return to group training. They have failed to reach an agreement with the Italian government's Coronavirus Technical Committee on conditions to restart the league. Training in groups was due to start today, but Serie A sides not happy that the government says the whole squad of a club will have to be placed in quarantine if a single player tests positive for COVID-19. Sport Ireland have confirmed they won't be appealing the 1-month ban handed down to James Cronin. The Munster prop was facing the prospect of his case being brought to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, but that has been ruled out. Now, Cronin was suspended for what was deemed to be an unintentional anti-doping violation. Golf returned last night, of course. Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson beating Ricky Fowler and Matthew Wolff in the tailor-made driving relief in Florida, so our Golf Weekly lads will be happy with that. World number 1 McIlroy hit the decisive shot in the nearest pin challenge on the 19th hole. The charity match, played without spectators, was the first professional golf to be televised since March. The PGA Tour is set to resume in Texas on the 11th of June. Loads of good stuff on offtheball.com as well this morning. A really good piece, Nanny, talking about a missed penalty against Fulham at Craven Cottage back in August 2010. So Alex Ferguson used to get lifts from United players that he lived close to when they were in London because they had to get the train. He missed a penalty. He grabbed the ball off Ryan Giggs. Ferguson berates Nanny in the dressing room afterwards, berates Giggs for giving them the ball. So really good piece up on offtheball.com this morning as well. And I know it's the last dance day, lads. We've got the last 2 episodes out this afternoon on Netflix. So just one quirky story for you to finish off. Basketball legend Michael Jordan's autographed trainers from 1985 have sold for a record $560,000 in an online auction. The Nike Air Jordan 1s, they were worn by Jordan during his rookie season with the Chicago Bulls, were expected to fetch between 100 and 150 grand at Sotheby's, so they've done way more than that. The previous record was 437,000, just over, for a pair of Nike's 1972 Moon shoes. Jordan, of course, wore mismatched trainers. His left was a size 13, his right was a size 13.5. So, they've sold for quite a pretty penny. The Air Jordan 1 sold by Jordan Geller, who founded the Trainer Museum Shoeseum in Las Vegas.
Quite a lot of cash.
For a pair of shoes. I mean, Jesus. And they're worn as well, so they can't smell too great.
I thought it would be more.
Did you?
When you were saying 563, I was like, oh my God, $500 million. And then you said thousands, and I was like, oh. Right, okay. What are the greatest pieces of art? What's the most expensive piece of art in the world? 100 million quid?
Not mass-produced, Eoin. Not mass-produced.
These are the ones that Jordan actually wore. They're not mass-produced. There was only 2 feet that have worn these, and Michael, like they of course you can buy a replica. I think $500,000 is an absolute steal if you got it.
Really?
If you have it, yeah.
Really?
They're signed as well.
What? Where are you going to put them?
In that case, where would you put them? On your feet?
Oh, you can't wear them. You can't wear them.
Wear Michael Jordan's shoes.
No, if they're worth $500,000, you can't wear them.
They're not Billy's boots. You're not going to play like Michael Jordan just because you wear his shoes.
Listen, we're in a global pandemic. You can walk around wearing expensive things because who knows when you're going to get the opportunity to do that again. Go on your social distance walk. Nobody's going to step in your feet. It's a perfect time to do it. $500,000. I think that's a steal. I really think that's a steal.
Rookie season as well. Worn during his rookie season, so it adds a bit of intrigue to it as well. Maybe it is a steal, but I don't know. They're size 13 and size 13.5, Owen, so if you want to try them on, they might be a bit big. I don't know.
Who were you to say what my shoe size is? That I didn't expect.
That was an assumption. Yeah, sorry.
I didn't expect Michael Jordan to be like a 16 or a 17 actually, but that's just me.
Yeah, I actually expect him to be more as well. I'm a size 12, but are the US sizes are size different to the UK? Are they?
No,
well,
I don't think so. I think that no.
That is fairly small then for a basketball player.
Right.
Size 13.
Well, let's move on quickly, lads. Shane, good man. Thanks very much.
Cheers, lads.
Right. Here's what's coming up for you on the rest of the show. Nathan Murphy's going to join us. We're going to talk through a new challenge that has been set for us by our friends at Aviva. It's to pick the top 10 football and the top 10 rugby moments over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to whittle them down and we're going to have polls. So Nathan's going to join us around about 8:40 this morning. Kildare's Mount Rushmore starts from 9 o'clock. Joe Malloy's going to be on alongside me as we tease out exactly who should and shouldn't be on it and what the criteria are. Willie McCreary, who of course was part of Miko's team in '98 and has subsequently gone on to have a brilliant career as a trainer, is going to join us to try and weigh up exactly who from racing should be on Kildare's Mount Rushmore. And David Shanahan, the young Kerry man who is going to make it in college football, has just been given a scholarship by Georgia Tech to become a punter, has been down in Australia training to be a punter, and has obviously followed his dream. And this week it has been announced that he is getting a full scholarship as Georgia Tech's new punter. And so from next January he's going to be in Georgia kicking balls in college football. So we'll all become Georgia Tech fans for a little while. He's going to join us around about 9:45 a.m. this morning. Now, at 22 minutes past 8 this morning, it's time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Yeah, so we'll start with offtheball.com. Sport Ireland decide not to appeal James Cronin's doping ban. So Una May has been in conversation with a couple of different reporters. She's spoken to the Irish Times, she's spoken to the Irish Independent as well. And the bones of it is, it would seem like an unnecessary and inappropriate and lengthy process to go through for the sake of 1 or 2 extra months. So their assumption was that the Court of Arbitration for Sport might find in their favour, but if they did, that it would only extend the ban from 1 month to 3 months. They said that they feel that the ban is lenient, but that it doesn't make sense from a cost perspective or a legal perspective to do that. Other stories there: sports journalism and the rise of Daniel Kinahan. This is the Sunday paper review, and Kieran Cunningham's contention that more sports journalists should have been talking about this story earlier. I cried myself to sleep, Packy Bonner, on Celtic sectarianism. And that's the rest of the interview. We played you a good chunk of it there. The full thing is about an hour long, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts. Best place is obviously the Go Loud app or offtheball.com/podcasts. And German football fans express anger over Bundesliga ghost games. So a very negative reaction in loads of places, Owen, about football coming back and how, this isn't the same, it's not really football. It's like, I mean, yeah, fair enough, but like, this isn't normal circumstances, and so therefore everybody is trying their best to get back to something that will allow us to have stepping stones to get back to normal life.
Without question, and also there is the financial implications of having football back and what that might mean for a few clubs, especially when you look at it in the context of the Bundesliga at the weekend, what that television money, for example, will do for clubs, and if the supporters actually want to be able to get back to a situation where they can go to a game, then this is obviously a necessary first step. I'm personally all for it, as long as it's kept in a very safe way. I think the idea that it is not as entertaining as sport with fans, and therefore should not go ahead. I just don't buy that argument whatsoever. If you're coming at me with the argument saying I don't believe it's ethically right and I think that everybody should be locked inside, there's obviously more of a reason behind that argument. But this is a stepping stone to getting back to normal, you hope. The Irish Independent this morning, it leads with the James Cronin story. Sport Ireland decide not to appeal Cronin ban. So you've kind of mentioned the notes from this already, but the long and short of it is that Sport Ireland believe the lengthy appeal would have at best led to a 3-month ban, for example. Now, his ban has basically already been served without missing any rugby, but obviously a 3-month ban possibly would have been the exact same thing. Another issue would have been that it would have taken potentially 6 months before the case is heard by CAS. That's what Una May said. She still said that she considered 1 month to be lenient. She says we could put up a huge battle to increase it to 3 months and it could be unsuccessful. For the sake of 2 months, it doesn't appear appropriate to go into that level of work in detail because there is a comprehensive file attached to this case. There's really good stuff on this as well in the Irish Times, by the way. She does go on to say that the player story wasn't just accepted right at the beginning. Although he wasn't in a face-to-face cross-examination, he did respond to multiple queries. And that has been one of the questions about it, about the lack of a cross-examination on James Cronin here. But it looks like the 1 month ban has been served. That's what they're going to be happy to proceed with at the moment. The Irish Independent elsewhere leads or goes with on the back page, Condon saying prize funds and no fans a small price to pay for a racing return. This is Ken Condon, the classic winning trainer, who's saying significant prize money cuts and big racing meetings being held behind closed doors are definitely a worthwhile exchange for getting the industry back up and running next month. And Dundalk seek to training return to keep pace with your arrivals. They're going to try and persuade the FAI to ease the restrictions on training and allow their players to get back to work so they're not left behind their European competitors.
The Examiner this morning is next up, and in Perth, players can golf, so why can't they play football? That's that same story that you've been talking about there, Vinnie Perth, obviously. There's emails back and forth and various discussions. I've even spoken to Niall Quinn myself. We're trying to work together, but obviously the medical officer of the FAI is leading this. It's a difficult one to comment on. To be fair to the FAI, they're in a very difficult situation because we're in a pandemic, but League of Ireland players will work this week. Of that, I've no doubt, whether it'll be on building sites and shops or outdoors, but our players can't, and I'm not sure that's right. 4 of my players who live together were due to come in for a soft opening to test our new facilities and measures that we've put in place. The 4 lads are all obviously bitterly disappointed now, but they may now all go out and play a round of golf together. That's where we're at. So there are certainly some inconsistencies, and as we work through this, those inconsistencies are going to become more obvious. McIlroy tonic as club golfers set to swing back into action. Cork hopeful of racing resumption in July, and Bayern resumed title charge as fans divided on Bundesliga return to action. And they also have the story that Sport Ireland will not appeal Cronin's 1 month ban.
The back page of the London Times this morning leads to the story that clubs fear rivals would lie about tests. This is an unnamed Premier League executive who says that if players test positive for coronavirus but are asymptomatic, they may still take to the field. In some sort of theory out there that relegated clubs obviously have a lot on the line, and if a player isn't asymptomatic, they could get away with secretly being a carrier of the coronavirus. There's also quotes here from Eva Carnero, the former Chelsea doctor, saying that players' health is being compromised by the bid to resume football next month. The main photograph there, of course, is Rory McIlroy holding his own bag. Is that as jarring as seeing Donald Trump phone into live golf broadcasting? Potentially it is. You've got end of neutral test umpires and players paid to be cut for good. This is a really worrying story from Owen Sloth this morning, that the pay deferrals for a lot of rugby players at the moment could become a permanent thing. 25% wage cuts were the norm at the start of the coronavirus pandemic.
The Irish Times leads with a Malachy Clerkin column about racing. Racing shouldn't take the heat for being one of the first sports back. Frustrated, Sport Ireland won't appeal Cronin ban, which goes a little bit against what Una May had actually said on this show when she was speaking with Joe. She said that money wouldn't be a deterrent to them when it came to appealing the James Cronin ban. US players have the measure of things, us players have the measure of things as the great return beckons. It's a Martin Turner piece about the return. And so the Malachy Clerkin piece is essentially saying that racing shouldn't be blamed for their ability to lobby. This should by rights be a cause for celebration. in the end, that racing produced for themselves a happier outcome than had been the case before. It doesn't matter if you're not a racing fan, it doesn't matter if you're not a sports fan, all you need is to be a fan of getting life back to some sort of settled state. Which I think, if everything goes well, if football in Germany goes well and they can keep it on for the next while and the reinfection rate stays down, well then we can all begin to dream about what the third part of the year and the fourth part of the year are going to be like in terms of sports and mass gatherings and all that kind of stuff. So we've got to try these things at some point, right?
Without question. We're very much in the area of being kind of blindfolded and not knowing how much floor we've got in front of us. Like we had Uli Hess on the show last week, and he wasn't overly confident that Bundesliga could make it to the end of the season, which is obviously it was a fairly sobering thing to listen to and hear about. And maybe it does come to a situation where it might not be able to make it to the end, at which case you'd almost feel in a worse situation than he did at the very start of this. But the flip side is that if it does manage to make it all the way to the end, then it gives hope for every other game around the continent, every other game around the world, really, at this point. The Irish Mirror this morning, top of the morning to you. Balloonacy is the headline on the story of Alexandre Lacazette. He's facing a huge fine and he's putting his Gunners' future in doubt, they say, as club vows to take his inhaling picks very seriously indeed. He's the latest footballer to indulge in a bit of hippie crack. Now, Rory McIlroy, meanwhile, sees light at the end of the tunnel. There he is, eyeing up his latest approach shot there. And 1,000 tests a week for Prem clubs. Premier League clubs will carry out at least 1,000 tests on players this week in the first step towards a project restart.
You're a millennial. I want to explain hippie crack to us old folks.
Oh, and I would need to get the technical term up here. But, Arsenal players love it. Jack Grealish loves it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And it's obviously consumed in a good way.
Well, and what does it do to you, Eoin?
It's laughing gas. But I'm trying to. The technical term, of course, is nitrous oxide. So I'm not sure how I didn't manage to get it. It gets you high. It gets you laughing. It makes you happy.
What's the issue? How does it do serious damage? Is it the moral panic? Is it making everybody go out and sell their shares or drive their car too fast or whatever it is that footballers might do that would bring about the end of civilization?
If you're worrying about a footballer taking voluntary anaesthetic, then I think you've got better things to be worried about, to be quite honest with you. It can, of course, have drastic effects if you take loads and loads and loads of it, I would assume. I don't think that the scientists out there are exactly sure of what it does or what the long-term negative implications are for it. In my personal opinion, I see it as hugely harmless. And if you're a manager of a team and you've got a professional footballer, do you want them doing hippie crack the day before a game, the week before a game? Not really. If they're doing it in the off season, is that an issue? For me, it's actually not an issue whatsoever. Are we in an off season at the moment? I think so. I think go on ahead, Alexandra, suck all the balloons you want to and have all that hippie crack. But once today's meeting happens and Premier League football is back on, you got to put that away until next year.
The back page of the Star this morning is Cloud9. This is Celts to finally be named as Scottish champions again. Celtic are set to be crowned Scottish champions for the 9th season in a row. It's obviously a very important number in Scottish football. Gunners fury at Lacazette. Alexandre Lacazette is facing major doubts over his Arsenal future. It comes after Arsenal confirmed they're ready to take serious disciplinary action after Lacazette was pictured inhaling hippie crack. He's on 200 grand a week. Could face a maximum of 2 weeks fine. Imagine that costing you 400 grand. 400 grand for a mouthful of hippie crack.
It must have been good stuff.
I hope it was worth it. At last, bundas of joy for fans and Dunphy. Haaland's a real star, but his agent is a problem, of course. And Davy Russell, fixtures clarity is a big relief. And then Dublin's Euro boost. Dublin retains an outside hope of hosting extra games at next summer's Euro 2020 finals. We do want extra games. We do want more or maybe there'll be no fans. We want all the games then. If there's no fans coming, that'd be great. But we do want more fans from all around Europe next summer. We're sure that's a good idea. Are we? Have we thought this through? Definitely.
Yes. But
it'll be fine by then, right? You're right. Be optimistic. It's going to be totally fine by then.
what can you do? If you're going to lessen or weaken your bargaining position by saying, well, we're not sure about this, but I don't know, Bratislava comes up and says, actually, we're going to be pretty confident that we're going to be okay to have fans in our stadiums by next June. You don't want to weaken your position by saying, by kind of revealing your hand too soon. But extra games are good. At this moment, it does seem that extra fans are bad.
Yes, that's a nice way of distilling it down perfectly.
The Irish Daily Mail this morning is injury risk. Sterling warns proposed return date is too soon. City Star insists players need 4 weeks to build up. Top physio fears late tackles, strains and niggles. So Raheem Sterling casting doubt on Project Restart, saying that a month is obviously what they need to get back to full fitness. The Project Restart date, proposed date, was supposed to be June 12th, but it's looking increasingly likely it could be June 19th, which is 1 month tomorrow. So there is a way that, if they get back to some sort of collective training this week, which could happen, I reckon, then you do have your month or close enough to a month to actually get back up to some semblance of match fitness.
The Irish Sun, Prem TV cash row. Prem clubs fume at getting less money for more games. Premier League clubs are embroiled in a fresh row over TV money as they get ready to return. Teams are growing unhappy with Sky Sports, claiming the broadcaster is moaning about paying less money for more games. Lack in the dock, that's a Lacazette story. And Harry Kane cannot wait to start chasing his first goal of the decade if the Prem resumes next month. And then obviously Marcus Rashford back fit and well after all his injury issues.
The Herald this morning leads with that story about the Premier League meeting today. The headline is "Step Closer, Crunch Meeting to Decide Premier League Restart." As I say, it's looking like June 19th could be the start date. And also there's that Packie Bonner story. Delaney, it was difficult to work with former FAI CEO John Delaney during his time as technical director with the association. That's obviously from Joe's piece with Bonner on the show yesterday.
And the Guardian back page is Lee Hendry. My wife went through an awful lot. She's seen me on life support machines. Lee Hendry on his road to recovery. And City forward says full month of training needed before restart. That's Raheem Sterling, who is stepping up into a leadership role here, just for loads of different reasons, turns out, because he's a good person eventually.
The Irish News is the final one from me, and you've got Ricey McMenamin fearing that a post-COVID recession will spark a player exodus. He says it's looking like there is going to be a recession, so that probably will be more of a factor. If a young fella has to travel abroad for work, that's his livelihood. He'll have to more years not playing football than playing, so sometimes you have to look after number one, and that is obviously a grim reality that we're going to face when the dust starts to settle on this a bit more.
Back page, the Telegraph finally for me for now is club set to back plan for restart on June 19th. So that's Premier League coming back on the 19th of June. And Reid angry as McIlroy tees off. Rory McIlroy teed off the much heralded exhibition match in Florida last night for the first live male golf in more than 2 months. Yet just as the skins game, also involving the other three lads, was heating up, Melissa Reid added some controversy. The English woman who's played in 3 Solheim Cups tweeted, "Yet again we show the disparity between men's and women's golf. Today's charity event should showcase golf, not just men's golf. What an opportunity golf let slip to represent equality." Right, let's move on because Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, is marking the 10-year anniversary of the official opening of the Aviva Stadium and its proud long-term sponsorship of the iconic venue. To celebrate this milestone, Aviva are paying tribute to some of the most iconic sporting moments of the past decade. Feel free to join in. You can follow Aviva Ireland on Instagram and Twitter and share your favourite Aviva Stadium memories using the hashtag #SafeToDream. Now, this week we're doing football, next week we're doing rugby, and Nathan Murphy is with us this morning. Nathan, good morning to you.
How are you getting on?
I'm very well. I'm very excited about this. How do we whittle this down?
Well, we leave it up to the general public is how we whittle this down. I've got together a 8-game shortlist and an 8-moment shortlist. As you say, all of football this week will go to rugby next week, and there have been quite a few memorable moments at the Aviva Stadium over the last decade. So I've whittled it down to 8, and we're going to have a couple of polls today, a couple tomorrow for the quarterfinals, then we'll get into the semi-finals on Wednesday and Thursday before we crown the greatest Aviva Stadium football moment on Friday.
And so what are the 8? Can you tell us, or are you just revealing 2 today? How does it work?
No, I'll tell you them all because there's a poll up right now if you go on to Add Off the Ball. The first of them is Shane Long against Germany. You might remember this year. Beat the world champions. Shane Long with the goal in 70 minutes. Up against the 2019 FAI Cup Final. FAI Cup Finals, a remarkable record since moving to the Aviva Stadium a decade ago. 10 FAI Cup Finals. 7 of them have gone to extra time. 4 of them have gone to penalties. And the 2019 one, the one just gone, was one of those that went to penalties, and one of the most dramatic games I've been at. It had one of my favourite things, which is the completely unexpected goal. It was a brilliant game, 2 best teams in the country, Shamrock Rovers against Dundalk. Very, very tight. Last minute, Rovers get a penalty. Aaron McInnes puts them in front, and that's it. The game is done. People are walking out of the stadium. Shamrock Rovers, they've ended their long wait to win an FAI Cup. And then out of absolutely nothing, 93rd minute, last kick of the game, Michael Duffy scored this absolute worldy volley from the edge of the area for Dundalk to send it into extra time and into penalties. It will go down as probably one of the most memorable goals in Irish football history if Dundalk managed to go on and win it.
I feel for that game slightly, it's unfortunate that it's going up against an all-time classic where we beat the world champions.
It is, but there were so many FAI Cups that you could have put into this because, again, there's just so much drama in all of them. Listen, Shane Long obviously was a moment that brought the nation together on Camden Street at 4 a.m. in the morning, and it's always going to be hard to match that. always going to be hard to match that. But I think definitely that 2019 Cup final deserves to be on this shortlist, and ends then. Duffy unfortunately misses his penalty in the shootout, and Rovers go on and win the Cup for the first time since '87. So that's the first one. That one is up online now. That'll be there until lunchtime. Get your votes in. Maybe the Dundalk supporters and the Shamrock Rovers supporters with no football on at the moment can come together and unite and vote that 2019 final into the semi-final and just get rid of Shane Long. Show it as the domestic football that this should be all about. A little bit later then, the second semi-final is going to be the first match at the Aviva Stadium, which was Argentina and Lionel Messi coming to town. They beat Ireland 1-0. No Giovanni Trapattoni. He was in hospital recovering from surgery. So Marco Tardelli was in charge that day. Angel Di Maria scored the only goal of the game. Messi, though, standing ovation when he came off after an hour. Ran the show, as you would expect. It was Robbie Keane's 100th cap that day. The 2 number 10s, obviously very much the centre of attention. But anytime Messi comes to town, I'm sure for an enormous amount of people, it will be the only time that they have seen and will see Lionel Messi in the flesh. Live, in action, and it's a home game. It's the first match in the new stadium. You want to start on the right foot. Unfortunately, didn't happen, but it was Messi in town.
Yeah, we need to win. I think that one, like, again, an amazing event. We'll see. Like, it
was either that or we go for, our first win.
Well, when the
first goal,
when the rugby one happens,
Kevin Kilban heads home against Andorra. We could have gone for that.
Mighty Andorra, yeah, okay.
That's going to go up against the 2010 FAI Cup final.
Right. What happened then?
2010, this is one of the craziest games of all time. Kieran Kelly, I love to get a bit of Mayo into all these things, a good Ballon Road man, saves all 4 penalty kicks in the shootout against Shamrock Rovers. So Rovers, again, this long wait. 0-0 after 90 minutes. Crowd of over 36,000 is the biggest at an FAI Cup final for over 40 years. It's, I think, 25,000 more than we're at the 2009 FAI Cup final, and starts this trend of extra time and penalties. So 0-0 after 90 minutes, and Kieran Kelly steps up and saves all 4 penalties to win it for Sligo Rovers. And incredibly then, the year after, he's on the bench. Sligo are back in the Cup final yet again playing Shelburne. He's on the bench, and they bring him on at the last minute of extra time for the shootout, and he saves 2 more penalties, and they win it again.
That's pretty impressive.
So Kieran Kelly saving all 4 penalties in a shootout, I think very much he deserves his place on this shortlist. So it'll be Lionel Messi against Kieran Kelly, essentially.
I was going to say that I think that when we're doing the rugby next week, that New Zealand scoring the try to beat Ireland in the last minute is one of the all-time great Aviva moments, because of what happens after it, because of what went before it, because it's like, oh, this is going to be a lifetime of pain that we are always having inflicted upon us. Now that we've actually beaten them since, and again at the Aviva, I think that sometimes defeats can be hugely important moments in sports culture.
Well, when you're Irish, they're certainly hugely important moments in our culture. And yeah, I think that Ryan Crotty try will most certainly be on the list. There were options, obviously, for the heartbreaking nights like the humiliation of the 6-1 against Germany. Tomorrow in the quarterfinals, we are going to have one of those nights. But we're going to go for the 20 minutes of just pure joy when we thought we were going to the World Cup finals. When Shane Duffy scored that goal, scored that header right at the start of the game against Denmark, when all our dreams looked like they were going to come true. We were going to have a beautiful month in Russia touring after the Republic of Ireland squad. And then Christian Eriksen stepped up and broke our little Irish hearts. And that was a tough night. So we'll go for Shane Duffy's goal as a moment, because I don't remember, even with Shane Long's goal, I don't remember 10 minutes and 10-20 minutes of just pure joy and excitement and belief, considering we got to Denmark, a few days earlier, and there was nearly nothing between the sides. We had yet to see really anything of Christian Eriksen. We got through almost half an hour of a game before even seeing anything of Christian Eriksen. And then when it did, well, obviously it all went horribly, horribly wrong, and there was some tactical mistakes at half-time, and it ended up being one of the worst nights I think anybody's ever had supporting the Republic of Ireland. So tomorrow, Shane Duffy's goal is on the shortlist. That'll go up against another FAI Cup final, the 2016 FAI Cup final. Seanie Maguire, last kick of the game to win it for Cork City against Dundalk. These two obviously have had a massive rivalry in the FAI Cup 3 years in a row. They met in it. Dundalk won in 2015 in extra time. Then Seanie Maguire does this in 2016. And then Cork won again in 2017 on penalties. But this was probably the most dramatic moment of the three. Again, game done, dusted. Everyone's expecting penalties. Drops to Seanie Maguire inside the area. Twists, turns. Probably doesn't get the best connection. Takes a little deflection. And there's this agonising as it just trickles over the line as Dundalk realise that they're not going to win it. They're not going to do double, and the Cork are going to win the FAI Cup. So I think Seanie Maguire, for the sheer drama, a last-second winner, injury time winner in extra time in an FAI Cup final, I think deserves its place on a shortlist. Again, there were so many from an FAI Cup final point of view. You could have gone for Pats, winning it in 2014. They hadn't won it for 53 years. But the final one tomorrow is going to see John Walter's goals against Bosnia. So this is the last quarter-final. John Walter's goals against Bosnia when he got us to Euro 2016. Obviously, we'd had the first leg over in Zelina, a 1-1 draw in the fog. And while it was a game, I think everyone was quite confident. There was also a sense of, well, we have an ability to screw these things up. It's at home. How often do we dominate matches against teams? Rarely, if ever, even though Ireland are the better side. Could Edin Dzeko come to town and do some serious damage? So eventually, John Walters stepped up. We got a lot of luck. You might remember that first penalty kick, where it was a little cross inside the area from Darryl Murphy that sort of caught the trailing arm of a Bosnian defender and gave us the penalty. John Walters slots it away. Second one was a brilliant, brilliant finish. Walters had missed the first leg through suspension. And again, much like the night of the Shane Long goal, a good night in Dublin was had by everybody afterwards. So
I see a theme here. It's your personal celebration of the events that causes whether or not you remember fondly what happened, essentially.
I think, hey, listen, who didn't party after that night? We're going to Euro 2016. We're going to spend 5 weeks in an apartment in Versailles. That's not worth celebrating. What is? So I think John Walters more than deserves his place on this. And he's going to go up against probably one of the more heartwarming moments at the Aviva, which was the friendly against England back in 2015 when Jack Charlton returned to the Aviva Stadium back in Dublin and was brought out onto the pitch before the match and receives this standing ovation. And you can see he's totally overcome by the occasion, his head in his hands, tears in his eyes, and probably a last opportunity at that stage for the Irish people to say thanks to Jack Charlton for everything that he's done. Obviously, we've been enjoying and indulging in a lot of nostalgia around Italia 90 and USA 94 over the last few weeks, and a chance for probably the younger Irish supporters to see Jack Charlton and to say thanks for everything he did. I just thought it was such a special moment that really does stand out from the last 10 years. So Jack Charlton very much on that last 8 as well.
Right, so let's be having you. As we've said, Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, is marking the 10-year anniversary of the official opening of the Aviva Stadium and its proud long-term sponsorship of the iconic venue. And to celebrate that milestone, Aviva are paying tribute to some of the most iconic sporting moments of the last decade. We want you to join in. You can follow Aviva Ireland on Instagram and Twitter and share your favourite Aviva Stadium memories using the hashtag #SafeToDream. Now, we're going to talk a bit about what's been going on in the rest of the world of sport with Nathan in just a couple of minutes' time. But first I want to play you this. Here's Kieran Cunningham talking about what David Brady's been up to over the last while on the pay-per-view yesterday with Joe.
You obviously know David very well, Joe. And he said it's good. Like, there's a Raymond Carver short story called A Small Good Thing, and that line is often used I see in sports articles. And this is a good thing, but it's far from small. Like, it's a really big deal what he's done, and the movement in a way that he's kind of sparked, because a lot of people have, the Monaghan players, footballers have got involved, some GA people in Wicklow, Johnny Doyle, Kildare, Eoin Liston said a lot himself in few of the legendary Kerry players he played with, they've started doing it. He talked to one guy who was a Clare man living in Galway who loved Henry Shefflin, and Henry rang him up, rang this guy up. So, and Michael D. Higgins, the president, has got in touch with David Brady and thanked him for this. And if you factor in the time, you don't have short conversations with David Brady, as he points out there. The minimum, 15 minutes is how are you today? But so he's devoting, to me, it looks like 3 or 4 hours a day to this. So, and it's unpaid and it's voluntary and it's really helping people, and fair play to him.
Yeah, no, I think we all echo that as well. We've had DB on the show talking about it just as he was kicking this whole thing off, so we might get him on again over the next while to see how it's been going and get some more of those great stories from him. Nathan, sport is back, the Bundesliga and the golf last night. Let's start with the Bundesliga. Were you fulfilled? Were you not entertained?
It passed the Saturday afternoon, I think, watching Borussia Dortmund and Schalke. It was a strange experience, probably putting a bit too much pressure on it to replicate what we had experienced 3 or 4 months ago, watching a league that we don't always watch and probably aren't massively invested in. And while it's a big derby from a German point of view, I suppose you're just watching to see what it's like. I've commentated on games behind closed doors before, and it is a slightly surreal experience. The football was of a good quality. I think Borussia Dortmund, after the first 20 minutes, once they warmed up into it, were brilliant and destroyed Schalke. But it'll take a bit of getting used to. And I think that's the thing. People are writing this off already, saying, well, actually, you know what? No football is better than this type of football. But this is going to be what we're going to see for possibly the next year. The Premier League are very much talking about no supporters at games next season either. So it's the first one. Of course, it's going to be unusual. Some people are watching 9-10 games a week at this stage on television at packed stadiums. So to watch them without anybody there, it's always going to be strange. But give it a couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the valid point there is it's hard to know what it would be like if you were invested in it. If that was a Liverpool fan sitting at home watching Liverpool score 4 goals against a bottom half Premier League team, I think the Liverpool fan sitting at home is clapping and cheering and getting up off their couch as they normally would. I don't think the lack of fans affects the ecstasy you get off being an armchair fan whatsoever. I think it definitely affects the passive play when there's a dead moment, when you can really notice the atmosphere. But when you're watching that Dortmund team bear down on Schalke, certainly speaking from my sense of things, it was just as if it was normal, because you're totally focused on what is going to happen here. It is the suspense that we've been sorely missing, which I think having that back is more important than any atmosphere that you can possibly get through your television set.
Well, Tuesday week will be interesting because that's Bayern Munich against Borussia Dortmund. So this is a game that really does matter. It'll probably decide the title in the Bundesliga. And even the players, it seems, on Saturday were a little bit unsure. Understandably, at times it seemed as though players were maybe standing off tackles a little bit more. You'd have to assume that they're going to get into the run of this very, very quickly, considering how games are going to come thick and fast for them. But a game like Bayern-Borussia, when's there going to be a little bit of a scrap? When's there going to be a little bit of pushing and shoving? I think, does that return, or is that now actually players are thinking, well, I'm going to, as annoyed as I am, I'm just going to take a step back here because it's just not worth the risk. But I definitely think, people are writing this off too soon. As you say, a Liverpool-Manchester City game is probably, I think, 2nd or 3rd on the list when the Premier League does return. Let's see that. And also, let's see how we get used to not having supporters. I think it's interesting from a commentary point of view as to whether commentary evolves around this, because generally the view on television commentary is that the less the commentator says, the better. The pictures do the talking. Whereas, and I love somebody like Martin Tyler, who even in the biggest games, at times for a big goal, doesn't start roaring and shouting. Not every goal is the Aguero last minute of the season for Martin Tyler. He can just describe it brilliantly as part of the flow of the game. When there's no supporters there, and especially when people are sort of second screening all the time, you kind of need the commentator to get excited when the ball goes into the final third to make sure you're watching, to make sure, much like radio, to grab your attention. Well, I know you could say, well, listen, you should sit down and watch the 90 minutes and not be distracted. But people don't do that. No. So I wonder, will the commentary change to more radio-like commentary where you are trying to grab people's attention? Because I think that was something that stood out for me. I think they did a brilliant job. And we had Paul Dempsey on Thursday night show, and he's based in Wicklow at the moment. Whatever about doing an off-tube commentary, doing it with a co-commentator who's not even in the same country as you, commenting on a game in a third country, is incredibly difficult. And I saw a story that a Tesco delivery driver rocked up at Paul Dempsey's door in the middle of the match, which made his life a little bit more difficult as well. These are the things that people just don't account for.
Well, the thing is that obviously with new innovations and a little bit more access across different sports over the next couple of weeks, there will be almost a reversal of that entirely as well, though, where the commentator will have to shut up again. Like, there was definitely times last night watching the golf where I was like, hold on a minute there, I just want to hear what Rory's saying. Like, what is the exact bit of conversation they're having? Like, if you had that sort of element in football, I don't know if it's mic'd up on the sideline, managers or something like that, that is when the commentator can just stay dumb and actually listen to what is being said. I think there needs to be almost other creative ways of making it an interesting listen and keeping that attention from the audience.
Yeah, maybe they come up with that. Like, maybe, I don't think anybody thinks they want noise to be funneled through.
Do they not?
But maybe you try it out. Maybe you try it out for a couple of matches.
I think it works, Nathan.
If there was fake crowd noise?
Yeah, why not? I think we're like,
possibly.
It has to be on the table. Like the NFL have said it's a done deal. If there's no fans, there's going to be crowd noise pumped in, and you can see exactly. It's a much easier thing to do. It's third down. You play the noise from the last time these two teams played when it was third down. Or it's, there are very set. There's been a touchdown. You play the music, and it's like the crowd goes wild. So it's not the same. Obviously, there's a bad tackle. You can't have everybody. You can't have the pre-recorded, the referees, whatever being chanted. But maybe you can. Maybe we have to reach that point in 6 months.
It's a new career opportunity for somebody.
Well, it's a massive business.
You've got a bank of 80 different sound effects, and you got to be the guy who picks the right one at the right time.
Yeah, or like there's a different team of people who are, okay, you're our negative crowd, you're our positive crowd, you're our positive goal crowd. Like, when you start thinking about it, it's pretty easy to break down. And there's probably an algorithm that eventually becomes a bit of AI around the whole thing. And this moves very quickly to a point where, so we've been having this conversation. Would you be happy to put a pair of glasses on in your living room and be transported to be sitting in the stadium? You probably would. Right now, you definitely would, right?
Would you have as good a view of the game? Like, do you get the instant replays?
Oh, you can...
Do you get all the different angles?
Yeah, you get a 360-degree...
From your seat?
From your seat. And what's more, there's a microphone, so when you're shouting, it's coming out.
Okay, well, that I think is a bit of a game changer. Yeah, I would definitely be in favour of experimenting with the crowd noise. Even when they play the music after the goals, it just seems to fill the stadium a little bit more and makes it that bit more realistic. So 100%, I don't see why, if the technology's there, why they wouldn't experiment. And maybe by the time a new season comes around, obviously it's all been a bit of a rush to get this restarted.
Yeah. 087 918 180 is the WhatsApp number here if anybody wants to get in touch with us. What about McIlroy in the golf and Donald Trump sleazing his way into the whole thing?
I'm just surprised people were surprised by this, by any aspect of this. So we had a bit of a preview last year with Tiger and Phil and the match, which could have been a brilliant spectacle. Two of the greatest golfers of all time, spending 3-4 hours in each other's company and just stunk the joint out. They barely spoke for the vast majority of the 18 holes. And I thought they might have learned a lot of lessons last night. Firstly, in terms of how to produce this. So you say to Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson and Fowler maybe that you're essentially the presenters of this. Here's a list of 10 things, maybe one for each hole that you could talk about. Ask Dustin Johnson about blowing a major. Ask Rory about a dip in form over the last couple of years. And that sustains you for 10 minutes. What we had was Rory doing a little bit of uninteresting talking. And that was kind of it. And it's really hard to expect a huge amount else from the players. If you mic'd up any 4-ball in the world and you told them that it was on mic, are people really going to act normally? I don't think so. The golf didn't feel like, again, the whole premise of this charity is up against this charity to win more money makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Obviously, it's all for a good cause, essentially. But even still, the fact it goes to the 19th. Again, much like Tiger and Phil also went to an extra hole. And they basically had to make up an extra hole in Tiger and Phil for a 19th to decide it. And again, the last night, we're going to an extra hole. Let's do some sort of closest to pin challenge. Like, come on. Surely for a made-for-TV event, it can be a little bit more dramatic. And all of that's even before Trump comes into it. I just couldn't believe that you have Rory, this brilliant opportunity, probably the most interesting person by far in golf, and that they didn't plan it out with him in some way to get the best of that.
I think Rory deserves credit for being the uninteresting talking guy, because at least he was the guy who was talking, and like he threw in a bit of bad trash talk, but it was still trash talk, and it was, outside of Trump, the most interesting.
What did he do? So not everybody will have seen. Most people have not seen this. What did he do?
So to that Wolf kid, he's like, it's amazing how rich I've got off golf, $25 million in the FedEx Cup, and basically just rattling the cash in his pocket at this poor 21-year-old kid. Poor not in the literal sense, but kind of a guy you'd feel a little bit sorry for when Rory McIlroy is doing that. Like, that's the sort of stuff they should be encouraged to do. And of course that could have really bad consequences where everything just comes across as really cringy, like the Tiger Phil pre-match waffle before their head-to-head was absolutely awful. But Rory McIlroy might be able to pull it off. Rory versus Brooks Koepka is trash talk that I would watch if they were encouraged to do so, for example.
There's a big prize, though. You make a very good point about there's a big prize for McIlroy to become like somebody. If this sport ends up not getting back the way, or if there's a second wave where they can't have tournaments, and like you could have this every week where Rory McIlroy hosts somebody, and it's his thing, and it's his pay-per-view, and suddenly the value of that becomes huge. Even his value as a communicator into the second part of his grown-up career, when the golf comes off the heat that it is at the moment, and he becomes just another player in the field. Like, the opportunity to be his generation's Jack Nicklaus, the biggest businessman in the sport, is right there for him if he wants it, and this is probably an opportunity for him as well. Just one quick point about Mike Tirico. I don't want to let this pass, because he was halfway through an interesting question with Donald Trump about Rory McIlroy changing his mind and saying that he wouldn't play with Trump again before he bottled the question and said, "Oh, do they talk to you about politics, sir?" And Trump goes, "Yeah, you'd be surprised. A lot of them really like my politics." I'm not surprised at all. I think Trump was telling the truth 100%, that most of the golfers who play with him are absolute lickspittles who are like, "Oh, Mr. Trump, your politics are amazing. That tax cut that you gave us was absolutely sensational. I'm even way richer now than I was before, and I was very rich before, Mr. Trump. So I love playing golf with you." And then the last bit I thought was interesting was, it turns out Trump and Tirico are golf buddies, and they've played golf before. So there was no journalistic independence there. Mike Tirico has played golf with the president, and apparently Trump threw his ball into a greenside bunker. But there was no sense of revenge. There was like a very, very supine interview from Tirico when he had the chance right there to go, this guy has disowned you this week.
It was clearly a party political broadcast. Even Trump, who came on the line and seems to have a genuine love of golf, maybe because of the opportunities in cheating it affords him, but at times was almost going down the line of talking about his interest in golf, and then remembered actually he'd been put up to this so that he could get the message out to his community. And the golfing community is very much a Trump community. It's a shame, because you thought this was such an opportunity to bring up what Rory had said. And like Shane Ryan, who's on Golf Weekly, tweeted that, you know, Rory said he probably wouldn't play golf with Trump again, and then said some slightly stronger stuff. Made the point that a golfer saying he probably wouldn't play golf with Trump is the equivalent of another athlete giving a press conference wearing a Che Guevara beret, holding an AR-15 and declaring revolution beneath a portrait of Chairman Mao. Like, golfers do not speak up against Donald Trump, mostly because the vast majority don't have an issue. And it was the one thing, I think we were all critical at the time of Rory playing with Trump and wondered, would eventually he come to regret it? And he was very, very strong last week in knowing, I'm sure, the potential of a backlash, considering who you're dealing with, and considering you'd have to expect at some stage somebody will question Trump about this, because I'd imagine he'll try and put himself front and center at a lot of golf events over the next little while, that Trump may come at him with both barrels. And for the golfing fraternity and sponsors, who are very much on the Republican side of things, that it may not have been the wisest move. So I think, while it may seem from this side of the water as the obvious thing to say, from a golfer's point of view, I think it was a very brave thing for Rory to go out and say. And there is a big opportunity for him now, because he's, without question, the most interesting figure in golf. It'll be fascinating to see how that develops and how he wants to go with that. That's why I thought, maybe you throw Harrington into the mix for something like this, who just talks and talks and talks. But you need brilliant producers to force the players to talk about certain topics. You can't just leave it up to themselves. Well, you can make them,
you can give them a metaphorical conscience, say, this hole is your hole, you're in charge, and you're going to talk about this, and then the next hole it's somebody else and you're in charge, and you just rotate it. There's loads of ways you can do it. And look, first time out, not bad. Obviously fairly disgraceful, the interview with Trump, but other than that, not bad.
Well, Tiger Phil are back out next week.
Oh, yeah.
With Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
Oh, yeah. That could be weird.
So let's see if they
That's
have.
That's going to be weird. Tom Brady is weird. That's going to be great to watch. Right, Nathan, good stuff. Thanks a million. And when does voting is underway already?
Voting is underway. Shane Long up against Michael Duffy, Shamrock Rovers, all of that from last year. So add off the ball right now.
This week, it's your best football memories from the last 10 years of the Aviva Stadium. Next week, it's your best rugby memories from the last 10 years of the Aviva Stadium. And stay tuned to all of our social channels for that. Now, it is 5 minutes past 9 this morning. You're watching OTB AM. A reminder to subscribe to OTB on YouTube and to our various streams on the OTB Podcast Network. We brought you over 40 hours of fresh content last week. Some of our highlights: Mick Cannan on Friday Night Racing, Des McAleenan on The Football Show, Mount Rushmore of Down, Conor Deegan, Colin Murray involved in that one, Mount Rushmore of Meath, Hector and Tommy on that one, John Giles all-time 11s, it was his Rest of the World 11, Keith Wood's State of the Union, the latest Off the Bull looking at the Last Dance, and that one will go up today as well. Paul Rouse looked at the commercialisation of sport in the latest episode of his History of Sport series, and the Niall Quinn interview on OTB AM was there as well. The lads were looking back at the 1974 World Cup and total football on our World Cup Rewind this past weekend. Have a look at that, and then on the far side, it's time for the Kildare Mount Rushmore.
I wonder, was the total football slightly their downfall in the final? That, you know, Muller's goal was poor in the sense of where it came from. Could have been defended an awful lot better. But I mean, this philosophy was years ahead of its time. So many elements of it now would be seen as kind of, I suppose, normal. And when I think back, when I was younger, going to Gaelic Games matches in the summer, and, you know, the 15 players lined out literally exactly as they were in that team, and that was the way for so long, and it was just considered completely normal. So for the Dutch to be bringing in this philosophy, and it's still something I think that modern coaches, Arsene Wenger was probably a big exponent of it, and that changed the culture a bit in England as well, in that he would allow defenders freedom even in normal play to just creep into positions. And it's a big thing in the coaching manual now, when there's so much opposition analysis done of each team. So if you can get like a centre back, say a lot of teams now are playing, will say they've a free centre back. So if you can have a centre back who can kind of ghost into opposition positions, there's every chance he's not going to be marked, because nobody really knows who to mark. So the Dutch had this idea that your position wasn't really set in stone, and you can basically adapt to the position at that time. It kind of sounds almost like a game of Astro or whatever, but it was amazing. But I wonder, maybe in the final, was it a combination of the fact that it did have some failings, and as Dan mentioned as well, obviously Cruyff, you know, mentally wasn't, he was probably gotten that in that final, but they were the winners of the tournament in many ways, not only for their football, but also for their jersey.
There's always a jersey team with Johnny, really, isn't there?
Is it me though, Dan? Is it like when you look at these old tournaments, like the jerseys, like are any of them beyond any sort of?
I know, but like some people are just jersey enthusiasts, and I just go, that's a nice shirt, but I wouldn't labour on it, you know. I wouldn't labour. They all look pretty good.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Thursday night football with John Giles.
Johnny Giles is a national treasure. When he speaks, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. When he's on the show, I was in the car the other day, I parked the car and I sprinted into the house and turned on the radio. I love listening to him. I love Johnny Giles.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
I'm not worried about it. I can stand over this. Cora Staunton, Lee McHale, Kevin Kilban and Kieran MacDonald.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
It's time for the Kildare Mount Rushmore. The only county where waving the white flag is a good thing. St. Bridget founded the county and her cloak walked, so Paul Mescal's chain could run. If racing is not their game, then kicking up a fuss over GAA venues most certainly is. But it's not just Newbridge or nowhere today. It's Athy or nowhere. It's Selbridge or nowhere. Ger Gilroy and Joe Malloy, you're very welcome. How are things?
I'm pretty good, yeah.
This is a momentous occasion for you both. What's going to happen here this morning, if you're new to the Mount Rushmore game, is that we have our selector, who is Ger Gilroy. We have our challenger, who is Joe Malloy. Ger will pick the 4 heads on Mount Rushmore. Joe will be able to make one alteration. Today's special guest, today's last pitcher, is Willie McCreary, but he's going to be fulfilling more than just that. He is going to be educating us all on the correct racing picks. Ger, you might just kick us off here in terms of what we're thinking for your first head on Mount Rushmore and your thought process.
Well, we're just going to have a little bit of trouble with getting Joe. We'll get him in a second. I guess, Eoin, the issue here is that how do you divide up what the county is good at? Like, how much? We're a football county, right? Let's make no ifs, ands or buts about it. Kildare is a football county which has a chronic record of underachievement in football. And I think we need to be honest about that and begin to have those honest conversations. But we're also a racing county, and we have not underachieved by any stretch of the imagination in racing. So how do you weigh these up? Like, how do you decide which, when you've only got 4 places, do you have to earmark 2 for racing, because that's where the successes come from, 1 for football, and give yourself a bit of wiggle room for 1 more spot?
Personally, I find this whole idea of being generous to different sports a load of nonsense. I think if your 4 best sports people are racing people, then you go for 4 racing people, and that's it. Like this idea of generosity, sharing things out between eras or sharing things out between sports, forget it. Your Mount Rushmore is your 4 greatest sports people, the 4 sports people that mean the most to you and the people of Kildare. Is that not fair enough?
Well, like, by those criteria, Christy Moore and Joxer goes to Stuttgart, and you put Christy Moore on this thing, and everybody's like, that's a bit weird, but I kind of get it. I kind of understand that, like, the joy that this person has given is global, for a start. It's iconic at an Irish level. It's embedded in the most important coming out party that any nation has had. Like, Ireland, a brand new country, essentially, on the world stage for so long, was kind of really famous for the Troubles, and then all of a sudden we go and compete in an 8-team European Championships, and Jockey goes to Stuttgart is the genius that comes out of that. Like, I know it's not sporting achievement, but by your criteria, you'd be making the case for having him in there, and I don't think I can put Jockey goes to Stuttgart and Christy Moore on Kildare's Mount Rushmore.
I don't think anybody was suggesting that. Joe Malloy, you're there. Are you considering Christy Moore / Joxer?
Oh, jeez. If we're at Christy Moore stage, I'm going home, because my head's already wrecked. No, we're not considering Christy Moore. Ernest Shackleton was put to me earlier on, and he's not in either.
Ernest Shackleton actually has a bit of a shout here. What was your thought process like, Joey? Are you nervous, I think, is the question.
Surprised at how serious this becomes. Tommy rang me last week and said, "Do you want to do this?" I said, "Great, yeah, love to. Great idea." And my Sunday night begged to differ. It gets incredibly tough. I don't know what you thought, Ger. I had thought initially Kildare wasn't all that, and then you start looking at some very serious names that you're leaving out.
Yeah, I've left some. So before you were on there, right, I was just making the point that what do you do? Like, we're a football county, but we've got a long track record of underachieving in football. That doesn't mean we're not a football county. Like, that's still the main sport of the county. And yet, at the same time, we're also an incredibly gifted racing county who has had so much success. So how many racing people should be on Kildare's Mount Rushmore? It should be half, right? That's what I think.
Yes. I am, well, I mean, I know you're going to lead us off here. I am probably at 2 footballers, and I'm at 1.5 racing people. Right. That's where I've come down on. I think having Willie McCreary on later on will be an excellent help, because I'm not as equipped as I'd like to be to compare the achievements of a racing person with a footballer, for instance. But you do have to take the county's heritage and tradition into account here. There's no doubt this is a football-mad county. That is number one. Like, racing is not as big in the north of the county as the south of the county. I mean, that is the Kerry, that is the heartland. But equally, as you say, they've done just such extraordinary things in racing that if you ended up with 2 footballers and 2 racing people, and that was Kildare's lot, you couldn't say that was outrageous. But then we are, and I'm sure we'll come to it, we're leaving off some stellar names who would walk into a lot of counties.
It's an interesting point. I think from the outside looking in, I think Kildare is probably known as a racing county. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there, but it's up to you guys in terms of what it's like from within, what it actually represents, your own view. Ger, you might kick us off here. Your first name on Mount Rushmore. My first name on Mount Rushmore is going to be leader of the strike, Emma Byrne. Champions League winner in 2007. Top tier of English football winner in 01, 02, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09, 2010, 2011 and 2012. If your maths aren't good, that's 11 titles that Emma Byrne won. Over 140 caps for her country. Played the top tier football for basically 20 seasons and is undoubtedly the highest achieving in medal terms of any of the sports people that Kildare has ever produced. I also feel like in 10 years' time when we come and drive past the mountain and it's 4 lads, are people going to be going, a bit weird, isn't it? It's a bit weird. Like, do no women play sport in Kildare? Do they not have it? Do they not believe in equality? So for a bunch of reasons, particularly because at the end, when she's going out the door, she's thanking the FAI and SIPTU because she knows that she's left an indelible mark on the future of sport for Irish women by giving them equality. And, like, I think that's important. It's a great shout. Joe, how close did Emma come to your consideration?
She was somewhere in the top 6, 7, 8, 9 names, I would say. You can't argue with her credentials. They're outrageously good, and what she did off the field is really important as well. Ultimately, I didn't have her in. And it's hard to argue with her career in many ways. I mean, and she's of Leixlip United. And Kildare is a big football town as well, soccer town when I say soccer. Brilliant tradition. Newbridge around the north of the county, Selbridge, my own neck of the woods. Leixlip United is where Emma came through. As Ger said, her credentials, 134 appearances, outrageous for Ireland. Joined Arsenal in January 2000. And this Arsenal are the dominant team of her era. So she's playing for the best team. Domestic treble in her first full season, UEFA Cup. Like to win 9 league titles, 9 FA Cups. I took gender out of it, maybe rightly or wrongly. My feeling was, for not putting her in, is that maybe in 2, 3, 4 decades, the next Emma Byrne coming through, if she goes on to play 134 Irish matches, they will be watched by everybody in the county. They will be on television. They will resonate with people. They will be full of moments that we can all remember. And when you drive by that Mount Rushmore, you will think, yes, remember that save she made in that game. And part of the criteria, I think, and this goes against slightly a choice I'm going to make later on because it's from way back. But part of the criteria is surely that you drive by it and it resonates on an emotional level. And I think through no fault of her own, the vast majority of people in Kildare and maybe Ireland won't have seen any of Emma Byrne's games. Now, maybe that's not a great reason, but ultimately, when I looked at other names, I thought not just of the achievement, I also thought of the impact they had made. Now, Ger's argument is very convincing, so I'm not saying I'm reaching straight away for Emma Byrne to take off Mount Rushmore.
I think this is
that was ultimately the way I was thinking about it.
I think that's worth teasing out because Cliona Foley was in doing the papers a couple of weeks ago with you, and she was talking about how underreported it was. It was the anniversary of
the Dundalk women playing the first international match against an English team. Yeah,
no record of it, but they knew that it was the weekend that Dan had won the Eurovision, so they were like, "Oh, hang on a second, we've celebrated this 2 years too early here," and that really was the whole point. Is like this stuff isn't recorded. You're exactly right. That appearance record hasn't resonated the way it should do. But she's the OG. She's the one that if you stick her up there, every kid driving past goes, I can make it up there. And I think that's the power of now retrospectively beginning to recognise the female heroes who actually had to change and swap tracksuits because they were being disrespected so heavily by the FAI. I think to put that together and to come through our system to go to the highest level in English football and to win a Champions League, like, it's actually harder to do that from Leixlip than it would be if you were a bloke from Leixlip, because you'd be scouted the whole way through and there'd be a hot housing of the talent. And that's kind of, for me, it's the same point you're making about there needs to be an emotional connection. I think every young girl driving past would be like, actually, you know what, I can be beside Ruby Walsh, who's my next name, by the way.
Well, talk to us about Ruby, Joe. You're going to have the opportunity to make one change to this, Joe, but I think there's going to be more than 1 point of difference here. So I think Ruby's on both of your mountains, so you go for it, Ger, here.
Well, I don't have that much to say about Ruby beyond an absolutely sensational career. When you go back at the end of his career and realise that he was never the sports personality of the year, you kind of think something weird has happened in Irish sport where we don't actually fully understand the power that the jockeys have to bring people together, that sport itself has. It's been, for a while, certainly in the noughties, it seemed to be kind of cloistered away a little bit from, it didn't have a breakout star that had appeal, and then Ruby arrived, like this kind of perfect mix of Roy Keane and Jim Gavin, and I don't know, I think Ruby, there's a case for Ruby being one of the best Irish sports people of his generation, certainly. And in that case, he's straight up on Kildare's Mount Rushmore.
I think, as I said at the start, on the outside looking in, for me anyway, it's Ruby Walsh that is almost name number one on a lot of the Mount Rushmores that could be proposed for Kildare. Could I ask you, just skipping on to your third name then, who would be number 3 on your Mount Rushmore?
For me?
Yes.
If I had, I said this a little bit earlier, and I don't know if people have heard it, but if you're just joining, my football Mount Rushmore, I took the Paul Rouse attitude here, Joe, and I guess you got Larry Stanley on from what you've said, that if I haven't seen him, then I'm not putting him on. So my Kildare Sporting football Mount Rushmore would have been Glenn Ryan, Niall Buckley, Dermot Earley and Johnny Doyle. And at that point, who do I pick?
I know.
What do I do? Niall Buckley was the best of the footballers, but his career is so short. It burns so brightly, and then it's and maybe in some ways that's exactly what you want here. It's like what could have been. He's our James Dean. He is essentially the James Dean of Irish football, where at 27 he goes off to Chicago and we kind of hear this echo. And bear in mind, the internet doesn't really exist properly, but we hear this echo of him winning championships in America and working away and living an alternative life. And there's a sliding doors moment of well, Jesus, if actually he'd been in that Kildare team from 27 to the maturity of 33, 34, what actually would have happened, and how many more people would have been inspired by him? Dermot Earley, obviously, is the only player who bookends the McGeeney era and the Micko era and plays and has a significant role in both, scores a goal in an All-Ireland final, and has 9 years, I think, between his All-Stars. Johnny Doyle was our best player for the period of time when McGeeney was there, and we believed that something was possible, because look how high he can jump and come down with the ball and still kick 10 points in a match. And, what a brilliant human being as well. And Glenn Ryan was the captain of the best team we ever had after 1920, whatever. So, that's so hard to pick. In the end, I really wanted it to be Niall Buckley, and it was Niall Buckley up until last night, because he's my favourite footballer. This is my Mount Rushmore, and I would be no, I'm just putting him up, and you're going to have to take him off if you don't want him, because
I would have taken him off.
You wouldn't have?
I would have.
You would have.
He would have had to go, unfortunately.
Well, so that was my game theory. That keeps Emma safe, you know?
Well, that will obviously be up to Joe in just a moment. Or, as I say, a number of different options here. But just before we go back to you, Joe, I just want to get Ger's full picture of his Mount Rushmore. So we've got Emma Byrne, Ruby Walsh, Dermot Earley, and we're taking a tentative step into another.
Yeah, so I went for Dermot there. I didn't actually tell everybody that, Eoin, but I did go for Dermot Earley there on the basis that he had an All-Star early and he had an All-Star late, and it was just as an important a member of the McGeeney era.
Oh. Which obviously makes things even more difficult.
Who did you go for? What was your footballer?
I think I have 2 footballers.
But who's your modern footballer?
I mean, this changed repeatedly, but the most recent one I have is Johnny Doyle. So look, if you talk about those footballers for a second, like Dermot Earley is just beloved in Kildare. You can't overstate how much that family is beloved in Kildare. As Ger said, he made his debut in 97. He played right through until 2013. He's a 2-time All-Star. His career was interrupted in a battle with cancer. The whole county was behind him. I remember that time. I remember people asking, how's Dermot? He came back. He seemed to have a period where he kept getting injured. He never went away. And then he had this incredible Indian summer under Kieran McGeeney, where you would say he really showed what a class act he was. He was just phenomenal for a couple of years there, won another All-Star. And I think more than anything, Ger, and it's a point which everybody can recognise, is he carried himself with such distinction. He was just class personified. If you're thinking of Rushmore in terms of ambassadors as much as anything, you know, that Emma Byrne argument as opposed to raw achievement. You know, I remember even the day Dermot Earley's father died, and, you know, this awful day, and Kildare were to play Antrim that evening, and people didn't know what Dermot Jr. was going to do. And I was working at Kildare FM that day. I remember arriving at the stadium, and word had come through that he was going to play, but still people weren't sure. And then there was the Kildare team. When I got there, it was just before throw-in. They were lined up on the 21, arm in arm. I remember Dermot beside Kieran McGeeney. The game wasn't on television, but it was the most extraordinary atmosphere. Like, it was wedged for this game against Antrim, this qualifier against Antrim, which actually turned McGeeney's fortunes. It's a slight tangent, but it was almost as much a tribute to Early that night and what he meant to Kildare people as it was a game of football. And I didn't think you were going to put him in. And I don't know if I can take Dermot Earley off, because, like, you can't overstate the respect that he's held in within the county and beyond. I'm sure everybody gets why Dermot Earley's special. Like Johnny Doyle, briefly. Johnny Doyle made his debut in 2000. He played 67 championship games in a row. He didn't miss one. And then he retired 67 games later, 15 years later. And Doyle got better as he went on. He was a much better footballer by the time he won his All-Star in 2010 than he was when he came on the scene as a young player. There are, and Ger will know as well, there are just so many games that Doyle won single-handedly. And like, where the Larry Stanley thing gets tricky and the All-Ireland medal gets tricky from way back when is that, you know, in GAA in particular, you can't just say, show me your medals. It's not fair on GAA players. Doyle was Kildare's only marquee forward. Slight man, not a big man, rangy, but I mean, he was roughed up by the opposition's best defender, or often double marked in games, in every game, and found a way to be a marquee forward, to be, across those 15 years, effectively for a lot of the time, Kildare's only national talent, international talent, just a phenomenon. And with Alan Wood as well, is the ultimate clubman. Can't overstate that. He'll be umpire in an under-10s game if needs be. He is dedicated to the end. And then you've Glenn Ryan. I mean, I wouldn't have picked Glenn Ryan. I think captaincy is overstated a little bit. But I mean, he's the quintessential Lionheart. If you're looking for Mount Rushmore as like a representative thing as well. I mean, Glenn Ryan jumped into my mind initially. You remember his speech in '98 when they won the Leinster title. You know, he said, I'm going to take my time because I've been waiting a long time. It was iconic, you know, and he won 2 All-Stars, like a serious player. And he managed the under-21s to a Leinster title and an All-Ireland final. So in the end, I'd pipped for Doyle, but I'm not taking Dermot Earley off. If you put Earley on, I can't take Earley off. He's just ultimate representative of Gaelic football in the county. Have you a second footballer on?
No. I don't.
Right. We have to talk about Larry Stanley briefly, don't we?
Yeah, okay.
Go for it, Joe.
Let's do that now.
Okay. See, I was trying to fight against recency bias. The reason I'm not going to take Early off and put Johnny Doyle in is Johnny Doyle meant something to me, for sure. Like, I loved him. Just brilliant. But, so, trying to take recency biases out of it. If in 50, 60, 100 years they're doing this, will Johnny Doyle have survived the test of time the way Larry Stanley has? And I'm not sure he will. And Larry Stanley has survived the test of time. He is a name that is still talked about. He only died in 1987. Like, he is a real living, you know, we can think it's way back when. Larry Stanley, a lot of the generation before us will have known him and met him around Kildare. Passed away in 1987 at age 91. Would have been his birthday tomorrow. He was born in Prosperous. He made his debut for Kildare in 1916 as a 20-year-old. Now, 3 years later, as a 23-year-old, he captained Kildare in 1919. He gave a standout performance in the Leinster final against Dublin. And then in the final against Galway, it wasn't a thriller. It was only 2-5 to a point. but Larry Stanley scored 1-2. He scored half of what Kildare scored in that All-Ireland final against Galway. The Kildare Observer called him a superman and a footballer of the first order. He is a player that has no equal in Ireland today. So he was the best player in the country. Now, black mark against him, he went off and played for Dublin because things were different back then, and he joined the Guards in Dublin. But he played for Dublin for a couple of years, and ultimately he missed out on those All-Irelands in the late 20s for Kildare. I've read different reasons as to why that is. One of them was he was unhappy with some of the physical tactics, and he was a targeted player, but I don't know exactly why he didn't play in those 1920s All-Irelands. But we're talking about 1919, captain of the team, scored half their points in an All-Ireland final. And then, to go alongside that, he wins the British high jump title, he wins the Irish high jump title, he goes to the 1924 Olympics in Paris, and he finishes 10th. By all accounts, a really disappointing personal performance. But that same year at the Tailteann Games, which are a massive deal, have athletes from all over the world coming, he finished a very close second. He was an inch behind the Olympic champion, Harold Osborne. So he finished second in the Tailteann Games, this international competition. Now, I know that couldn't happen today. The standards are too different in both sports. You couldn't do both. And it was of its time. But equally, it's not like we have many Gaelic Games captains, All-Ireland winners, All-Stars who also went to Olympics. Now, that's extraordinary. And I don't, by all accounts, he was a wonderful man. And people who met him in the 80s when he was going around, he was just this lauded figure. And Willie McCreary would probably be able to talk to us about him. Like, that survives, in a way that maybe even Dermot and Johnny and Glenn Ryan don't survive in another 100 years. Like, Larry Stanley will still be massively in the conversation later on. And you don't want this to be a 1990s onwards thing either. So I had Larry Stanley in mind for those reasons, because I think every bit as much as it should pitch towards Emma Byrne and her achievements, equally there should be a link with the past. So, like, how do you leave someone who's done that out?
Because there's only room for 4. That is the difficulty here. Like, I guess I took Paul Rouse sitting here going, I had to have seen them. I had to have seen them, and I understand that. From a historical perspective, you probably have to have Larry Stanley on. And I'm not sure why he versus the team that wins the first Sam Maguire, and probably because there's good stuff written about him as well. Like, when we're nitpicking the fact that he played for Dublin, like, I mean, Shea Fahy and Larry Tompkins and Shawnee Johnson kept getting mentions a lot. The Shawnee Johnson one, obviously, it was funny the first 18 times. Round about the 100th time, it was like... but Larry Tompkins is probably the best footballer ever from Kildare. I'm not putting him on.
Yeah.
I'm not putting him on.
I think when it comes to your GEA disagreement at the moment, it's Dermot Earley versus Johnny Dolan. I think we're already leading towards a situation where Dermot Earley is going to stay on the mountain. We're going to get Willie McCreary up in just a moment, just to actually talk us through some of the racing decisions. But so far in Ger's list, it's Emma Byrne, Ruby Walsh and Dermot Earley. Joe's been making cases for Johnny Doyle and Larry Stanley. There is one more person to make a case for in just a moment after we get to Willie McCreary, a non-racing person. Ger, how are you feeling about your mountain so far? Has Joe persuaded you to make any alterations?
Not so far, right? Like, the 4th slot and the contenders for the 4th slot are suddenly, like, so you could put Johnny Doyle or Larry Stanley on my 4th slot and I'd be relatively happy with that. But at the moment, the contenders are another racing person, right? And so, again, as I said earlier on, you could have a full racing Mount Rushmore. You could have Pat Edery. You could have Dermot Weld. You could have John Ox. You could have Jessica Harrington. There's a bit of debate about whether or not she sneaks in under the border or not, which we can get to in a moment. Does Jordan Murphy get a look in here? Does Michael get a look in? Probably not. I just want to briefly talk about Dom O'Rourke, because Eric Donovan put him forward, and Eric's career is not finished just yet. And, if he goes on to become a European champion in boxing, then on top of the incredible amateur career he had, he might be in the conversation himself. But there were 4 boxers from Athy in the Ireland squad for the World Championships in 2007. Nearly a third of the entire squad. Like, from one club to have a quarter of a national team at a World Championships I suspect they might have been the most successful boxing club in the world for that brief period of time. He's not going to make it though, right? I need the help of Willie McCreary here to explain to me what the difference between Dermot Weld and John Ox and Jessica Harrington and Pat Edery is. That's kind of the bit where I'm at the moment.
What about Jamie Heaslip, Ger?
Well, yeah, sorry, Jamie Heaslip obviously has to be in this conversation too, right? So, 95 Ireland caps, 5 Lions caps. His record is 3 Heineken Cups, 3 Pro 12s, a European Challenge Cup, 3 Six Nations Championships, a Triple Crown as well. Is he part of that Triple Crown 07? A Grand Slam, and for good measure, 1 World Rugby Try of the Year, which I'm sure is not one of his most prized gongs.
No. But can I just hand this back over? Because I think if Joe, you were the selector, I think Heaslip might have actually made your mountain. So there's another. It's not just Johnny Doyle or Larry Stanley. You want to actually put forward the case of Jamie Heaslip here as well.
Yeah. Now, if I was to get like the 4 I had settled on this morning at like 8:59, which had changed a lot, probably ultimately would have been Ruby, Larry Stanley, Johnny Doyle. And I would have had to drag in Willie McCreary and say, tell me the difference between Pat Edery and Jamie Heaslip. And that's leaving Dermot Weld to one side. But yeah, like, you know, I heard the Rob Kearney discussion with Dan and with Ronan, and they talked about Rob Kearney being effectively, you know, second name on the team sheet after Steve Staunton. Like Heaslip, Ger outlined his credentials there and the Grand Slam, 2 Triple Crowns, 3 Six Nations, 95 appearances for Ireland between 06 and 17. Ifs, buts and maybes. The injury obviously robbed him of being a Centurion and robbed him of his second Grand Slam. And I think if he has won 2 Grand Slams and he's over 100 caps, he probably certainly goes in. And it's such a pity that happened because he was playing some of his best rugby then. He was World Rugby Player of the Year nominee in 2016. So he's a massive omission. And I don't know where variety comes into this conversation as well. I mean, you have Emma Byrne in, Ger, so that's, you know, that at least is soccer as well as just football and racing. I mean, Heaslip's doing his thing in front of nearly 1 million people almost every time he plays for Ireland. It's an elite level. British and Irish Lions starting number 8 in those 3 Lions tests of 09, went again on a second tour in 13. Were you close to putting him in? I mean,
yeah, so
it's a serious omission.
It's nitpicking, right? But he gets dropped in the second line series. Like you're trying to make cases against people here who are absolutely incredible achievers. And look, you know, he obviously went to Newbridge College, so the Kildare credentials are fairly strong. But I think that racing is more important to Kildare than rugby is, and that's kind of, you know, that's why we have our guest with us.
Yeah, exactly. Willie McCreary, very good morning to you.
Morning, man. How are you?
I'm okay.
Very well.
Not great.
Not great. Why?
Well, it's too difficult, Willie. It's too difficult. So, from your 98 team, who was the best player on the team?
Oh, by far, Glenn Ryan.
Well, there you go.
Right, by far.
Johnny Doyle wasn't on that team.
No, he wasn't. I picked Dermot Earley as my football nominee.
Which for Dermot Earley only came in the year before. If you say, for example, if you went out and one man had to stop, you could stop Johnny Doyle, you could stop Dermot Earley, you'd take 2 men to stop Glenn Ryan. That's my... Glenn Ryan was also a leader for us. And I think he was so influential for our team in 98. You know, I wouldn't... the only football lad I'd put in a modern era would be Glenn Ryan. Johnny Doyle wouldn't come near him. Wouldn't lace his boots, even if they had Velcro.
Really?
Willie, you were meant to come on and make this conversation easier.
I am making it easier. We'd have won nothing if we hadn't got Glenn Ryan. We won nothing since and nothing before. And none of ye have witnessed us winning anything. And Glenn Ryan was a pivotal part of it. So I wouldn't even go far. I wouldn't even mention another football player in Kildare apart. Glenn Ryan was on it.
Well, that's
in my era. In my era. So I don't know where you're coming up with Johnny Doyle. I could mark Johnny Doyle corner forward.
Well, Joe is proposing Johnny Doyle. He's currently not on the mountain.
Are you talking about 98, Willie? Or are you talking about?
I'm talking about the whole career. I mean, if you're playing round towers, you're playing Glenn Ryan. If you stop Glenn Ryan, you stop Round Towers. If you're playing Alan Wood, you know, you can easily cut Johnny Doyle out of it. You know, I wouldn't have feared Johnny Doyle. I'd always fear Glenn Ryan, because Glenn Ryan would probably, you know, he would change a game, and he could read a game like I've never seen a player read a game. And everyone said, "Oh, he's all over the place." He's not all over the place. He's always where the ball is going to land nearly, and that's what to me makes him an exceptional player compared to any other player I ever played with.
Do you accept that there is a legitimate claim to the Mount Rushmore place for Johnny Doyle as there is for Dermot Earley, as there is for Glenn Ryan, if you just take it as bigger than just footballing talents?
As bigger than just football and talents, I think Johnny Doyle was loved by the people because, you know, he got such terrible abuse, I suppose, on the pitch, because he was like I used to call him a bag of bones when I trained with him, because you'd run into him, and like, I'm a big solid lad, and you get a bruise off him because he hit you with some kind of bone from somewhere. He was just total bones, but you know, and a great athlete. You know, Glenn Ryan wasn't an athlete at all. He was more like a fathlete, but he worked so hard to get up to that fitness. And Dermot Earley was just a pure, like, I mean, he could hang in the air for nearly an extra second because he was so athletic as well, you know. And I think of the three of them, Glenn had to work harder for it, but he was determined to work harder for it. The two boys now, I'm not saying, geez, I'd love to have them on my team all day long. I'm not saying anything against them, but I just think of where we were in '98. I think Glenn was the driving force behind a lot of us.
Was Johnny Doyle not the driving force for a team that got to an All-Ireland semi-final? He's playing in a tougher position than Glenn Ryan. Like, he was double marked. He was roughed up. He was Kildare's only marquee forward. He took the frees. He won games on his own. Like, that's a serious mantle as well. I mean, Glenn played in a better team than Johnny ever did.
Yeah, and Johnny was on his own, and I thought it was unfair of him to be even asked to be captain, because I thought it put more pressure on him, and I thought that was unfair on him. I thought he was more of an attacking player, and I think when we took him down as a third, you know, took him down away from the forwards a few times, like, you had to be on the edge of the box. Johnny couldn't kick a pint from 30, 40 yards, but in around the edge of the square, you know, and we had to make room for him. We had to have a lad in there to make room for him, to rough up the two lads who were roughing him up. I thought we never protected Johnny all the way through his career. I thought it was very poor on the lads who were playing with him. He was a better player than he actually played because no one was minding him. And if you look at all the good teams, the star attackers, they're minded by someone. Someone is a donkey just minding them. And I thought in Johnny's team, they had no one like that. The management couldn't see that to be done. I thought it was the whole way through his career, he wasn't minded properly.
The case for Dermot Earley is that he was on the 98 team and was important in it, but that actually in the later McGeeney team, he's the most important player. So he's got the longevity on either side of his career and similar number of All-Stars to Glenn Ryan. Yeah,
but sure, he never had to work a day in his life. He's in the army. So all he had to do is be a full-time player. You know, and a great piece of work Dermot was. Like, he had the army mentality, you know, come on troops and all the rest. You know, he was always for the team, never did anything bar football, loved football, and was a complete athlete. And like, I'm not going against the two boys. I'm not, you know, the two great lads that I played with, very lucky to play with. They had more football in their big toe than I had my body. Both the three of them, they love football. We're so at ease with football. But I'd have to go. I just thought Glenn, if we hadn't got Glenn in '98, we were scrupled. Probably if the lads, you know, in through all their time too, you know, they probably underachieved a little bit by not playing the right people in the right positions, I thought, a few times in the later teams, you know.
It would be great if we could get a couple of these footballers into the Kildare Mount Rushmore, but I dare say, Willie, that won't happen because we're going to try and get two racing names in there, I'd imagine. It's up to Ger at the end, but it's up to you to make the case. The only consensus we've had so far is that Ruby makes the mountain, and I don't think you're going to argue with that. I think we're just looking to hear who should be the second racing name up with him, if there is to be a second racing head on the Kildare Mount Rushmore.
Well, on Ruby, like, I mean, sure, he's synonymous. He was the 11-time champion jockey in Cheltenham. That's when all the you know, that's the Olympics. I mean, Ruby is a great rider. Was a great rider. but he's also a horseman. He faced the horse down to every fence, had full confidence in the horse, gave the horse great confidence. He had the few unlucky times, but I mean, his last 10 years of riding, he's up over 25% winners to rides ratio. His last 5 years of riding in both Ireland and England, he's up to 30%. So that's 1 in 3 horses won. So he was the punter's friend. Do you know what I mean? He was probably on odds-on shots, probably on steering jobs, but he made no. If you look at him in a Grade 1 race, he's always in the right place. You know, he cruises around, and you see him there, and he's riding, giving the horse loads of confidence, and you know he invariably wins without hitting the horse, but still the horse knows he has a race because he's squeezing him the whole time. He's asking him, and like he's a brilliant horseman. Comes from a brilliant horse-related family. I mean, he rode in an Irish national for his father at the age of 20. I mean, how lucky was that? And then to go on to be to 41, to retire in Punchestown on a Grade 1. I mean, a jockey's dream. So that's Ruby, brilliant, and he'd have to be there. My second one, I would put would be Dermot Weld. I mean, Dermot Weld went over and won one of the Triple Crown races in 1990. You know, when it was unheard of for Irish trainers to bring a horse to America to run on dirt. Do you know what I mean? He won the Belmont Cup, the Belmont Stakes. He won 2 Melbourne Cups when horses never travelled. That people took 3 and 4 days to get down to Australia. Never mind horses, with 2 different horses, with 2 different jockeys. You know, he had 2 of the best jockeys, and he made them 2 of the best jockeys in the world in both. Pat Smullen and Mick Canaan, you know.
Well, what's the difference between him and John Ox? How do I tell? Like, how can I tell? They're both amazing careers. Does John Ox get a consideration?
Oh, he does. You know what he did with Sea the Stars to win 6 Grade 1s in 6 months. You know, that's like winning 6 All Irelands in 1 year. You know, and the way he treated that horse is unbelievable. Like, he won Prix de l'Arc before that. He's won Forays. Like, you know, fantastic. But I just think John Ox was more Europe, but Dermot Weld could see the bigger picture. Dermot Weld has won races in every continent bar Africa, and if you bring a horse to Africa, you can't bring it back. So that's probably why he hasn't won one there. You know what I mean? And you know, both of them are training within a mile of me. Both their staff, I'd say they have the oldest staff in the Curragh, which means they're great men to work for. Do you know what I mean? Lads are there with them all their lives. They're both 3rd generation trainers, and they're great for racing, both of them. But I'd have to just edge Dermot Weld on his world scale as to John Ox on his more European scale.
What about Pat Edery? Where does he come?
Pat Edery, a fantastic jockey, a great ambassador. Like, I mean, but do many people even know he was from Kildare? You know, he had a slight English accent. But I mean, what he did with the great Vincent O'Brien was unbelievable too. You know, so he was always a great ambassador. But I wouldn't say many of your listeners even knew he was Kildare man. You know.
Yeah, on Edery, I mean, I wouldn't have known much about him. So, you know, born Newbridge by the Curragh, like, we're talking British flat racing champion jockey 11 times between 74 and 96. If you're doing the all-time list of flat jockey wins, he's number 2 all time. He's ahead of Lester Piggott. 14 Classics, 3 Epsom Derbies, the Guineas, the Prix d'Arc de Triomphe 4 times.
Yeah.
That's tough to leave out.
He is tough to leave out.
It's his Kildare credentials you're questioning.
Yeah, well, no, it's not, because he's born in Kildare. It's just that he didn't spend, I suppose he didn't earn much of his living here in Kildare, whereas the Ruby Walsh born in Kildare, has always lived in Kildare, and you know, travels from Kildare, I suppose. Actually, Ruby Walsh was in '98. He was there cheering us when we came back from Dublin there when we beat Meath. So he's an out-and-out Kildare, and Dermot Weld was at that as well. John Ox was at. They're all at, you know, so they're out and out earning their living in Kildare. So that's where I'd have to be more for those lads than probably Pat, you know, who earned his living in England. You know,
so they get bonus points if they cheered you.
That's Now you're learning.
You weren't having Jessica Harrington.
No. Look, if it was women only, she'd win it by a streak. What a trainer she is, and only recently, you know, she won't be able to go and see her horses run. Say nothing about that. But I mean, she's she's phenomenal what she's done, even just in the last 5 to 6 years. You know, before that she was just mainly National Hunt and a few flat horses. Now she's turned it right around and she's mainly flat and only a few National Hunt horses. She's her first winner in Ride Ascot a couple of years ago. She has serious fillies there that are going to, you know, she could do the treble and win the French, the English and the Irish 1,000 guineas within what, 3 weeks of each other, you know. And a great ambassador for racing too. I mean, Hardy is nuts, but like she's a Mead woman. She was born in Mead. She's a foul, you know. So I you know, what's her? How do you get in there, lads?
Moon is Kildare. There's definitely a north-south divide here, where you know you guys have no clue where the border actually is.
Hang on,
we're back beating the Savages from Laois and Carlow away, and you guys are like, yeah, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, but no, when you're up around Wicklow, no one's fighting over land up around Wicklow there.
Listen, Willie McCreary, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks for clearing everything up. I'm sure it's clear as mud for Ger to actually put his forehead up the mountain.
Could I just ask a question out of interest, Willie?
Yep.
How would you compare if you had to pick between Dermot Weld or Jamie Heaslip or Johnny Doyle? How do you pick those three? If you had to pick one.
Well, you see, if you think of Kildare straight away, Johnny Doyle's going to come ahead of the two boys, but then I'm a GA man as well. Do you know what I mean? Jamie Heaslip, what he did for Kildare, you know, he was educated, wasn't he? Educated in Newbridge, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You know, so he's an out-and-out, born in Naas, you know, a legend of a player. And it's probably a short-lived career, really, hasn't he? You know, for such a giant of the game. But how many years has he played with it?
I know, in a long career, like 12, 95 caps, like 12, 13 year career. Yeah.
Right. You know, like I think Dermot Weld, for his longevity, to win a race in 1990 in America, to win an American Classic when it wasn't heard of a European horse to go over, I think probably, and to win 2 Melbourne Cups, to see the Irish flag flying in Melbourne would probably edge Dermot Weld.
Sorry, lads, why don't either of you have Willie McCreary on your list, Ger and Joe?
because they got a bit of class, man. They don't want donkey.
I thought you were going to put yourself on, to be honest. That's why I left it off.
Yeah. You would leave it off. With that, lads, I think we'll say goodbye.
Listen, Willie, thanks a million. It's been great having you on.
No, pleasure.
Willie McCreary there. Trying to persuade Ger Gilroy and Joe Malloy on how they should be presenting their mountain. Ger, finally, you run us through your 4 options that you would ideally have up there, and Joe, you'll be able to make one change.
Emma Byrne.
Can Ger make as many changes as he wants here now before he gives these, like after the Glen Ryan intervention there?
Yes, he can.
I'm sticking with Dermot early on the basis of the longevity, bookending the two teams, and I think the point you made about the atmosphere in Newbridge in the Antrim game, like that, you know, when tell us about this guy, Da. Well,
yeah,
you know, at a time of massive heartbreak, he showed up for his county.
It feels wrong to leave Glen Ryan after what we just heard.
I mean, that was sensational. I I know your point about in 100 years. We'll be dead. We'll be dead in 100 years. They'll be going, who's that Larry Stanley lad? I don't know. That Glen Ryan guy for the next 50 years. So, I mean, I don't like your task, Joe. My task was,
go on.
Who's my 4? Emma Byrne I'm sticking with because I think, you know, an industrial leader, a change, an agent of change, and I think our best and most successful soccer player. So we have no soccer representation if she's not on. I think Ruby Walsh has to be on. I'm sticking with Dermot early, and I'm going with Dermot Weld because of what Willie McCreary said, but I stacked that up with a couple of other people in the racing game, and while See the Stars and what John Ox did with See the Stars is absolutely unbelievable, like a level of perfection that is almost never been replicated, that there is a longevity, there is a taken, like being the first is hugely important, and Dermot Weld makes it so.
Joe, your time is now. Who is the person you were taking off, and who is the person you were putting on?
Well, Ruby guaranteed. It's hard to take Dermot Weld off now after hearing that intervention as well. So, like, we're looking at a point here where Glenn Ryan, Johnny Doyle and Jamie Heaslip don't get on this.
It's a good strong mountain when that's your bench.
It's good, yeah. I didn't have Emma Byrne on. She was in my top 7, 8. You've made a really good argument for her.
I think for us as people, we need to spend more time with our women sports stars. I think like it's a thing we all need to do to change our country for the better. And that's why I think she, like, if you said Ruby has to come off, I would protect her if I could.
Well, there's no protection card given here. It's open season, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a struggle. I can tell you. We're gonna have to push you for a decision here.
Larry Stanley's not going to come and knock on your door.
Jesus, I forgot about Larry Stanley. I've already left Larry out. I mean, so we're leaving out the All-Ireland winning captain who scores half their points in a final and goes to the Olympics.
Yeah, we are. It's a great bench.
Whatever.
It's a great bench.
That is an outrage, actually. We'll be in trouble for that alone.
The stone never gets chiseled on his face. There is no bench.
Yeah. If I was to make a move, and like Jamie Heaslip's a shocking omission here as well. He really is. If I was to make a move, I'd be taking. If I was to make a move, Dermot Weld is purely emotionally. I'm not into flat racing. That means very little to me personally. But it's hard when you hear what Willie said to take him out. Emma Byrne, Dermot, Ruby.
Who are you putting on?
I think football in Kildare is more important than flat racing. And I have to heed what Willie said about Glen Ryan. Kildare to me is a football county. I don't know about you, Jared. Feels of all the people, more than racing, as important as racing is. Like I'm tempted to swap Weld for Glen Ryan, but like 2 Melbourne Cups, first non-Australian to win a Melbourne Cup, doing that in '92. Like Byrne stays in, I wouldn't have had her in, but I take the argument. Dermot I can't take off, even though I would have had Johnny Doyle in ahead of him. I can't believe Johnny Doyle's not in this team, but Dermot can stay. Ruby's in. For me, it's Weld or Ryan at the moment, if I had to work it out. And I'm still looking at Jamie Heaslip's name, and that's a tough omission. Weld or Ryan. Like, I know personally it's Glen Ryan. How do you decide international versus local?
You might just have to trust that personal judgment there.
What would you think, Eoin? Glen Ryan or Dermot Weld?
He's a Kerry man. He's not allowed to have any influence on this.
Oh, dear.
He thinks Micko. He thinks Carl O'Dwyer needs a shout here and didn't get one.
We can make a strong argument for Micko.
Okay, so
Glen Ryan is in for Dermot Weld. Glen Ryan is in.
There we go. Glen Ryan in for Dermot Weld, which gives us a final Mount Rushmore of Emma Byrne, Ruby Walsh, Dermot Earley, and Glen Ryan. Are we happy with that? And where is it going in Kildare?
I'm not happy with that.
But it is what it is. Where in Kildare is it being chiselled?
Oh my God! Somewhere in the south. I think this has to move. We're the flattest of the flat counties. So, like maybe on the the 90 million euro stand in the back of the Curragh, it could be built there, and it could travel around. You know, I think that there's a travelling circus.
Yeah. On the back
we put
of
you through enough pain. Joe, enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thanks for putting yourself through that for us.
Pleasure. Thanks, fellas.
R.I.P. your social mentions from the Dermot Weld bots.
Emma Byrne, Ruby Walsh, Dermot Earley, Glen Ryan. That's your Kildare Mount Rushmore.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
Right. It is difficult.
How do you feel?
It is difficult. I mean, it's fairly straightforward for you, Eoin, in that like you're going to have to pick your 4 favourite footballers, and that's it. And there'll be a lot of people giving out to you about the fact that you left off Pat Spillane and you left off Jack O'Shea and you left off a few others. But like, ultimately, it's just football, right? There's nothing else.
What are you talking about Kerry for? This is all about Kildare. You've got to stand over this now for the next couple of hours. Are you afraid of the backlash coming from your Lily Whites?
I put Dermot Weld on mine, and he was taken off.
No. Your Mount Rushmore.
I'm delighted.
The OTB Mount Rushmore with selector Ger Gilroy has Glenn Ryan instead of Dermot Weld on it.
I'm delighted for Glenn Ryan that he made it. I'm disappointed for Johnny Doyle. He didn't make it. I'm disappointed for Jamie Heaslip. He didn't make it. It was a tough road, but Joe makes the point. We're a football county. Now, there's a good long conversation to be had about where the hell we've gone wrong as a football county. There's a good long conversation to be had about what needs to be fixed to get Kildare back to the level where the senior team is competing at the level the under-21 and the minor team have been.
Well, Tommy's just saying here you could have put Dermot Weld on for Dermot Early. That is the opportunity you had yourself, and a lot of the cards here were in your hands, Ger. You can easily point a finger at Joe or at Willie or at your entire county, but a lot of the blame has to lie for you.
No, it's fine. I mean, I put Dermot Early on my mountain. I played this pretty well here. I'm pretty happy. I should have put Niall Buckley on, for my own sake, for driving past the mountain. Yeah, that's not Buckley. That's exactly who we want up there. Collar up. The only Kildare man who could wear his collar up and carry it off.
Yeah, that was a bit of a plot twist, wasn't it? Taking out Niall Buckley.
Not having him on. Yeah, right. Let's move on because an amazing story has emerged over the last couple of days about the greatest punter ever from Kerry, we think, because he's the first punter ever from Kerry. David Shanahan, good morning to you. How you doing?
Not too bad. How's the form?
Yeah, great. Not as good as your form, I suspect, in the last 48 hours or so, as it has emerged that you're going to be the new punter for Georgia Tech.
Yeah. Pretty crazy few 48 hours. Yeah.
When did you actually get the phone call to say this is happening?
So I suppose my coach in Australia, he kind of called me a few weeks ago saying that he thought they were probably going to offer, but obviously I didn't really want to hold my breath. I didn't want to get too excited, but I had a Zoom call then with 4 of the Georgia Tech coaches on Tuesday, and they offered then and made it official. It was pretty ecstatic. Yeah.
In the middle of lockdown, I'm looking at some classic movies, and Boys in the Hood was on, so we were sitting there watching it, and there is like a home visit where, it's fairly stereotypical. The parents have a lot of questions about what the education is going to be like. Did all that happen? Obviously it can't happen in person, but...
Sure, obviously Georgia Tech coaches told me they were gonna have a Zoom call with me, like a FaceTime. Sure, my mother spent the week cleaning the house, even though they're only going to see this bit live. But my parents haven't met him yet. Probably keep it that way for a while. But yeah, they trusted my judgment, I suppose.
And what course are you going to do? So this is a full education scholarship.
Yeah. So I think I'll probably study finance or business, something business oriented like that. Yeah. Because obviously I don't really want to. It's a big engineering school, I think, but I don't really want to be balancing like a kind of heavy engineering degree with football and stuff. So I think the coaches push a lot of the players to do business degrees and stuff. So probably that.
When did you realise this was a viable opportunity for you, or something that you wanted to pursue? Actual being a punter on an American football field.
I suppose I always really wanted to play American football. Like, if it was up to me, I'd probably play a cooler position, like wide receiver or something. But I suppose if I was going to get in, the only way I was going to get in was to be a punter. So I suppose I started kicking a few years ago. I was only kind of half dreaming away, and then I kind of took it seriously. Then when I was about 16, probably 17, I kind of started actually kind of learning the technique and stuff, and kind of hitting the gym, stuff like that. And I suppose, but obviously I had nothing to compare myself to because I didn't know if I was any good. But then when John Smith, who's the coach at Pro Kick Australia, he flew over for an assessment. That was probably the time I realised that I could actually do it. I suppose I got the gratification of knowing that I was half decent at it. Like
you've blah away a bit of the story there, but so Pro Kick Australia are this company in Australia who've been training punters.
Yeah.
And anybody who kind of paid any attention over the last couple of years will see that punters have started to be drafted much earlier than they have been in the past. The 49ers took one in the 4th round, the Seahawks taking someone in the 5th round the previous year, and they've been doing really, really good business and making brilliant careers for themselves quite late on, like 27, 26. How did you get in touch with Pro Kick Australia? What was the impetus for that?
Like I suppose I saw all the Australian lads were getting scholarships to college football. So it was just when I looked into it more, I realised they were all coming from Pro Kick, like they were all coming from the same place. So kind of Pro Kick pretty much run the game now for scholarships for kickers and punters in college football. Like they're the big dogs really now. Like they're getting a lot more scholarships than Americans do. So like if I was going to do it, they were the guys to do it. Like they were kind of the best in the business.
And they're based in Australia?
Yeah, they're based in Melbourne. So it's run by these two guys, John Smith and Nathan Chapman. And Nathan Chapman actually played in the AFL for 10 years, and he also played for the Green Bay Packers. And John Smith kicked for the Patriots for a bit as well, and the Browns, I think. Yeah.
Did you just send them an email and say, Howie, I'm a footballer, I've been practicing a bit, what do you think?
Yeah, literally. So I put together, I just filmed like a 1-minute video of me kicking. And I sent it to them like last June. And like fortuitously enough, John Smith, he's actually from Manchester, so he was back home for a few weeks when I sent him the message, and he was like, "Oh, what a coincidence! I'll fly to Dublin and we'll do an assessment." So I was like, "Oh, geez, I was a bit nervous, like." And so then I drove up to Dublin with my mom, and I had a kick in just some random field near the airport in Dublin, and I kicked a few balls for him, I suppose, and he said, he said, look, like if you move to Melbourne and train for like 6 to 12 months, you probably get a scholarship. So it was happy days.
That's pretty class. Like, so what's the timeline of this? Are you playing with the Kerry under-17s at this point? Is this a little bit after?
No, I was just playing with my club at this point. It's a little bit after the Kerry under-17s. I was just kind of playing. I was playing a bit of rugby with my club in my local team, and I was playing Gaelic football, just playing county league, like just having the crack really. And yeah, that's about all I was doing, to be honest. And so I met him in July, and then I moved to Melbourne in August.
Right. Were you that quick?
Yeah, it's pretty quick. My mother was a bit shell-shocked, I suppose.
There's a lot of there's so many different questions I have here. Just one thing very quickly before we go back to Australia. When you say you were playing rugby, were you playing as an out half? Because what they always say is like Ronan O'Gara might have made it as a punter in the NFL.
No, man, I actually didn't even take the kicks. Stress all politics in a small town, anyways. Like, but I was playing fullback.
It's so this is not like, I don't know. There's some part of this is almost like a reality TV show where everything is just happening very, very quickly here, and things kind of seem a little bit surreal. It must have seemed surreal being the guy actually in the middle of the story.
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. Like I didn't really let myself think about it, because I knew if I overthought it, I probably wouldn't have gone to Melbourne. But I just kind of just threw caution to the wind and just did it, I suppose.
What was Melbourne like? So you're 17 when you're in Melbourne, are you?
18.
18, okay. Yeah. So you're you're a grown up with all of the distractions that come from being a grown up and like a full-time athlete, but not professional at this stage yet.
No, Melbourne's unreal. I loved Melbourne. It's class. Like, so I was in a house with 5 other lads doing pro kick, and they're all Australian. Like, they'd all moved from different parts of Australia. Like, Australia's a huge country, like, so they were all a long way from home as well. Like a few from Sydney, a few from Perth, a few from like Canberra, stuff like that. And they were all really sound. Like, we got on really well. I think Australian sense of humour is pretty similar to Irish sense of humour. Like, they have the crack a lot. Like, yeah, Melbourne's class. Like, it's a huge city, and there's obviously a really big Irish contingent there as well. So yeah, had a good time in Melbourne.
And do you have to pay Pro Kick? Do you have to pay for your own food and board, or do they kind of take the punt that you're going to make it eventually and they'll represent you the whole way through?
No, so you pay them. You pay, like, they sort you out with, like, accommodation, and they've got their own kind of house and stuff, and they give you the gear and the equipment and the balls and stuff. But you have to pay them. You have to pay them for, like, there's an academic side to it as well, so, like, they've got to take care of all that, make sure, like, that all works, and then you obviously pay them to coach you as well, but, like, it's not that expensive. The whole thing was probably about $7,000. It's an investment, really, that.
Totally. So now you're full board, and is your scholarship full board the whole way through for 4 years?
Yeah, full scholarship. Yeah, won't expect for anything off that.
Not a bad investment, it turns out.
No, pretty good ROI there. Yeah.
And come here. Obviously, you're a decent punter. Like, when did you get good at punting? Like, the first day you go down, you're kind of this lunatic kicking American footballs on your own.
Yeah, like, I wasn't great at the start, to be honest. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like, it's kind of like if you take a mad swing at a golf ball, it's not really going to go anywhere. So I was just kind of doing that with the American football. Like, I didn't really have any emphasis in technique, and so at the start I thought I wasn't really very good. But then once I started paying attention to my technique and just kind of looking up YouTube videos on how to do it, and watching, like, NFL guys do it, and I suppose it just got a lot better. Like, I used to film myself doing it, like, break it down in slow motion and stuff, just so I'd kind of have it down pat. Like,
that's so. What was it about you that you moved ahead of high school kids who had been coached how to punt all along? Why did they go for the kid from Ireland who learned how to punt from YouTube?
It was more based off Pro Kick's reputation.
Okay.
So if you get the seal of approval from Pro Kick, it's pretty well trusted brand by a lot of college coaches in America now. So and that's obviously made by the guys that went before me. Obviously, you said the Seahawks took a Pro Kick guy, and the 49ers took a Pro Kick guy in the NFL draft last year.
Okay, right, yeah, because that was a big shock when he went in the fourth round.
Yeah, Wisniewski, he went through Pro Kick, obviously. He went to University of Utah and played in the Super Bowl last year, and yeah, he's got a massive kick. And there's a few NFL guys that trained while I was in Pro Kick as well. Like, it's really cool seeing them train, like, and how I suppose dedicated they are and stuff, and how sound their technique and everything is.
This is obviously only the start of the journey. You want to make it to the NFL, so there's no point in going to college and living the high life and not getting any better. How much better can you get? Like, what are the metrics?
So obviously, like, basis punting, basically just hang time and distance. Like, I still have a lot of work to do in my technique. Like, I'd say it's far from perfect. I have a lot of bad habits that I bring in from, like, Gaelic football and rugby, because I guess in Gaelic football you kick around, like, you arch your leg, you bring it across your body a bit, and, like, in punting you just kind of keep a straight line as much as you can. But yeah, so I've got a lot of that to do, and, like, obviously you can always get stronger legs. Like, I do a lot of kind of, like, explosive work and stuff like that, squatting, deadlift, stuff like that.
Was there a time when you were kicking American footballs around the field in Kerry that people were going, that guy's a lunatic?
Oh, man. So I used to go at, like, 6:30 in the morning because I was kind of embarrassed about it. I'm a bit of a freak in the sense that I only like training by myself. So I figured if I went at, like, 6:30, there'd be no one there anyways. But, like, I'd say, like, so I used to cycle down from my house to the field in the morning. Like, I saw the bread man every day. I say people wondered what I was doing, like, but yeah.
And you would just punt the ball from one end of the pitch to the other, like, just with yourself with a bag of balls? Would anybody ever come down to give you a dig out, give you a hand, even just collect balls for you?
Yeah, every now and then, like, I'd get a friend or something to come down with me, or my brother or something, but I always kind of kept it quiet. I didn't really tell too many people I was doing it. The balls are actually really expensive. They're like €100. So I only ever had about 2 balls, and they pop, because the balls are made for throwing, really. So they pop every probably 2 months or so. So I spent a lot of money on footballs. But yeah, I just kick the ball and then chase it and kick it back, pretty much.
Well, it's an incredible story, and it's going to have a next chapter is going to be sensational. Obviously, with everything that's going on, you don't get the opportunity to go over and hang out. Have you to go back to Melbourne before you go to Georgia?
So I'm supposed to go to Georgia in January, and I definitely want to go back to Melbourne for maybe like 2 or 3 months, hopefully, before it. But obviously, Australian borders are closed now, so I don't know what's going to happen there. But yeah, I'd hope to go back to Melbourne anyway. Yeah.
Well, congratulations! It's an amazing story, and well done. We wish you all the best of luck, David. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Thanks a million.
That's a remarkable story of David Shanahan chasing his dream, and look, those scholarships are not given out unless you are absolutely capable of doing what you're supposed to be. Eric Donovan's been in touch about our Kildare, Mount Rushmore, Emma Byrne, Ruby Walsh, Dermot Earley, Glenn Ryan. Well done, lads. Very difficult indeed, but great cases put forward. Great to hear Ger mentioning Niall Buckley. What a player he was. I have heard some legendary stories about him. Yeah, I haven't heard that many stories, but certainly it seems like he enjoyed life and enjoys life. Enjoyed the show. Sort Your Life Out says, poor Jordan Murphy, always the forgotten man. He got a mention, but just didn't quite have the same level of success as Heaslip. Jimmy Allen says, Dermot Earley ahead of Weldon Stanley. Good Lord, Jesus. Geordie Murphy, amazing shout. Yes, a great man, says Michael Native. So, there you go. Are you happy, Eoin?
I think well done to you and Joe and Willie, indeed, for getting out of this alive, because that was... there was a lot of traps there, and there was a lot of different things from a lot of different players from a lot of different backgrounds vying for a spot in that Mount Rushmore. And you haven't disgraced yourself or your county, not quite, but you did a decent enough job of getting about half the way there to disgracing your county. So well done. It's only half a disgrace.
We've gone way over time this morning. If you missed it, David Shanahan's incredible story. We kicked off our search for the greatest football moment in the Aviva Stadium. Nathan Murphy on the Bundesliga's return, and golf. We brought you the sports pages and much more as well. It's all time-stamped on our podcast, so wherever you subscribe to your podcast, make sure you subscribe to OTB AM as the podcast, and you get it for you every morning. We're back tomorrow morning at 7:30. Joe will be along around about 7 this evening on the radio on Off the Ball and News Talk. We'll see you tomorrow. Best of luck.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.